Chapter 302, Asking Grandmaster Ling to Act. Chapter 302, Asking Grandmaster Ling to Act. He'd gone too far. Not only was he chasing them back to the desolate north, he was actually planning on robbing them as well. Grandmaster Cheng, don't you plan on saying anything? Someone asked Cheng Fei-jun. The latter was the organizer of this martial arts tea party, and now that something like this happened, how could the host simply just stand by and watch? Since he was pointed out by this person, Cheng Fei-jun could only stand up and say, "Bao Xan Ran, this is the Fallen Moon Gorge and the territory of our Star Brilliance Palace Hall. Is it really proper for you to strut around here?" A black-grade high-level alchemist. Bao Xan Ran's eyes swept over him, and he could not help but pick at his ear. "It can't be that you're an imposter, right? You don't seem that much older than me. So how could you be a black-grade high-level alchemist?" He naturally knew what the 3 silver plaques hanging on Cheng Fei-jun's chest meant. Cheng Fei-jun's face instantly darkened. Was everyone not taking him to heart anymore now? He humphed and declared, "I am Cheng Fei-jun. Get out of this town immediately. Otherwise, the Star Defense Force will chase you out." When they heard these words, everyone felt vexed. His head was already being stepped on by another, yet the only thing he could do was make the other leave. How hateful! "Is that right?" Bao Xan Ran smiled calmly and casually withdrew a tiny flag which he stuck into the ground. Xiao! The flag suddenly grew as wind blew against it, becoming a huge flag that was 10 meters tall. There was a river drawn on the flag, and pure white snow surrounded it on all sides. One glance was enough to make one feel cold all over, as if he had entered into a world of ice and snow. No. This was not merely a feeling, but was quite real. They could clearly feel that the temperature of their surroundings had dropped considerably, and was still continuing to decrease. "The cold water sect's flag!" Cheng Fei-jun exclaimed in shock, and his expression turned extremely ugly. Bao Xan Ran laughed and said, "That's right, my sect is planning to use this land for something, and I hope that Grandmaster Cheng will give us some face. Otherwise, please do not blame my sect for not giving you face." Cheng Fei-jun's chest rose and fell sharply, hinting at the internal struggle he was experiencing. In the end, however, he fell down to sit on the ground. He had organized this martial arts tea party in his own name, and thus it had nothing to do with the Star Brilliance Palace Hall. As a result, he had no way to bring out the name of the Alchemists Association. The name of a black-grade high-level alchemist was indeed very awesome, and not even the bigger sects would dare to harm him. But this did not mean that the former definitely had to give him some face. Bao Xan Ran could completely set him to one side and ignore him, and how could it be that he would dare to run to the Coldwater sect and voice his objections? When they saw even Cheng Fei-jun had cowered, everyone felt a sense of hopelessness. Could it be that a few thousand people were going to be robbed by one person? Even if this robber was in the spiritual ocean tier, they'd have to flee. Anyways, this guy was only one person. If everyone fled at the same time, how could he be able to stop them all? "There is no way you can flee." Bao Xan Ran smiled. "This is the flag of my sect, and once it is open, the area within 1 mile of it will all be sealed. Without my approval, no one would be able to flee. Now, hand over the stuff obediently," he commanded coldly. He was here under the command of his master to stop the people here from entering the North region and participating in the entrance test for the Winter Moon sect as the Coldwater sect, and the Winter Moon sect were not on good terms. If he was able to weaken the other sect, or even deliberately embarrass them a bit, it would be good. However, when he arrived, he actually discovered that a large amount of 100-year-old ginseng and Ganoderma had appeared, which instantly made him very happy. He was really going to make a lot of money this time round. "Grandmaster Ling, we can only depend on you now." Qi Yongyi and the others came over and gathered around Ling Han. "Grandmaster Ling, just beat this guy to death." That's right, that guy is really too despicable. There was an Earth-grade alchemist here, and even if it was the sect master of the Coldwater sect who had personally arrived, he would still have to give some face to Ling Han. Just like how the spiritual pedestal tier warriors were still mortals, whereas the flower-blossoming tier was equivalent to becoming immortal. Once an alchemist ascended to Earth grade, his status would also spike sharply and was not something that a black-grade high-level alchemist would be able to compare to. Moreover, Ling Han's battle prowess was publicly acknowledged. He had consecutively defeated Feng Yan and Yin Tianzhao, so he was practically a monster. Ling Han could not help but smile and asked, "Didn't you guys want me not to make a move?" They were all embarrassed now. They had previously hoped that Ling Han would not make a move merely because they had wanted to take the first place in this martial arts tea party. But now that an outsider had arrived and was sweeping them all over with his superior ability of the spiritual ocean tier, they could only choose to ask Ling Han to suppress him. Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan were also urging him as well. If Ling Han stepped out at this moment and defeated Bao Xenran with an invincible stance, that would be equivalent to confirming his status as the strongest among the younger generation of the 9 nations of the desolate north. They naturally hoped that the man they loved could win such a good name for himself. Ling Han smiled and stood up. There was nothing else that could be done. Bao Xenran wanted to rob them. All this was in a direct conflict with Ling Han's own interests. Someone wanted to rob his stuff? There was nothing else that needed to be said. He just simply had to kill the robber. Ling Han's killing intent circulated. This was not the Rain country that had Rain Emperor there to curb his actions. Moreover, he had now become an Earth-grade alchemist. And in terms of status, he was above the Rain Emperor, so if he wanted to kill someone who was capable of stopping him, "You want to rob my stuff?" Ling Han asked as he walked, so that he was standing in front of Bao Xenran. Hunyao, meanwhile, was holding on to one corner of Ling Han's shirt and standing on one side. She could not help but bare her teeth. Someone actually wanted to rob Ling Han's stuff. Ling Han was Nio's, so Ling Han's stuff was naturally Nio's too. Then what you were robbing was Nio's stuff. Hunyao was very angry. A piece of trash in the first layer of the gushing spring tier. Bao Xenran snorted. Since when could even a piece of trash in the first layer of the gushing spring tier dare to stand in front of me and speak? Kneel. He issued a light shout, and the sound wave solidified, sweeping towards Ling Han. He had not cultivated any martial arts technique that was specifically focused on sound attacks, but with his cultivation of the spiritual ocean tier, this shout was like a lion's roar and was completely capable of tearing apart the skin, flesh, blood, and bones of someone in the gushing spring tier. Xiao! Ling Han had not even moved when Hunyao did. Her tiny body was like a beam of light that instantly appeared above Bao Xenran's head. Pa, 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 pa. The little girl slapped Bao Xenran's face repeatedly. Pooh! When they saw this, everyone choked. A 5 or 6-year-old little girl was madly oppressing Bao Xenran. Was this a dream? Only the martial artists from the Rain country looked proud. Previously, even someone as strong as Yin Tianzhao was heavily suppressed by Hunyao, so much that he could only win by using a powerful move. In the end, he was almost scattered and smashed with one slash by Ling Han, though. This adult and child were definitely monsters among monsters. What more when Ling Han had even become an Earth-grade alchemist by now, which made them only capable of sweating in the face of his ability. He was practically a monster without any limits. Ah! Bao Xenran was stunned by the attack, but immediately came back to himself. He was mighty and overbearing for half the day, but now he was actually slapped in front of everyone's eyes. How humiliating was that? He quickly waved his fist in a strike at Hunyao. However, Hunyao was too fast. With a xiao, she had appeared behind him and launched another series of attacks. Instantly, Bao Xenran's back burst open, and blood flew in all directions. Damn it! Damn it! After a few failed attempts at trying to catch Hunyo, Bao Exan Ran knew that she was far faster than him. He hurriedly leaped to stand next to the flag. Taking hold of it, he shouted loudly, "Cold water is invincible, freezing 1,000 miles." Hong, a white-colored cold air, gushed out from the flag, instantly freezing the area within 100 feet of it, everything becoming ice cubes. Ling Han and Hunyo were not exempted either, and both of them were frozen solid. Chapter 303, Two Monsters. Chapter 303, Two Monsters. What a grand move. It had instantly stopped two people in their steps. Everyone had initially been exclaiming their praises, but when they saw this, they could not help but feel their hope was lost. Bao Exan Ran was already powerful enough by himself, but now that he actually possessed an even more powerful spirit tool, who would be able to stand against him? This flag was obviously a spirit tool. Once the martial intent contained in it was awakened, it would exude a cold air that was capable of freezing its surrounding solid. So who was capable of even getting near to it? According to the rumors, the most priceless treasure of the Cold Water sect was called the Cold Water Flag. Once this flag was unfurled, it would really freeze everything within 1,000 miles of it, so it was extremely frightening. This flag was merely an imitation of it, so its power was in no way comparable to the real Cold Water Flag. However, how could it not be enough to suppress two gushing spring tier martial artists? Bao Xian ran spat onto the ground. A little girl actually made him activate the flag to subdue her. It was really a bit embarrassing. Meanwhile, Cheng Fei Jun smirked coldly. He had originally depended on Luo Ji Feng to kill Ling Han, but the former had not managed to succeed even after so many days. Secretly, he had called him scornfully as a piece of trash. But now, Bao Exan Ran was actually going to help fulfill his heart's desire. This made him almost want to rush up and embrace Bao Exan Ran and give him a kiss of thanks. What a wonderful man! Ka ka ka! It was at this moment that a sudden change occurred. There was a large area on the ice enveloping Ling Han that was suddenly covered with spiderweb-like cracks. It was visible that there was a crimson flame circulating all over his body, and this flame had already melted a hole into the ice. The strange fire. Cheng Fei Jun's eyes instantly reddened. He had had a strange fire before, so even though he was located very far away from it, he could sense a sliver of familiarity about that strange fire. However, it was also completely different as well. His own strange fire had been completely swallowed by Ling Han's strange fire. It was obvious that this strange fire was even more powerful. As it had been fused from two strange fires, this was natural. "I want it. I want it. I want it." Cheng Fei Jun called out internally. It was able to melt even the ice produced by the flag, so the might of the strange fire had to be exceptionally powerful. And yet the ka sounds had not originated from the ice block enveloping Ling Han, but from Hunyo's side. They could only watch as the little girl opened her mouth and continued to chew. She endlessly bit through the ice, swallowing and chewing very quickly. In only a few moments, her little head had appeared, and was currently in the process of freeing the other parts of her body quickly. Fuck! What kind of glutton was she that she could even devour this kind of ice? Bao Xian Ran's face twitched. These were two fuck asterisk monsters. Especially Hunyo, what kind of teeth did she have? Immediately his killing intent rose. He fixed his stare on Hunyo. As of this moment, she had not freed herself, so he was completely able to kill her easily. Chong! The twin swords at his waist left their sheaths and flickered with a cold light like water. "Hey, have you forgotten me?" Ling Han smiled calmly. "You're just a piece of trash in the first layer of the gushing spring tier. I'll kill you first, then kill this little girl." Bao Xian Ran flew forwards and charged towards Ling Han. He raised his two swords in a slash and hung. Martial intent circulated as ice and snow flew all around. This was no illusion, but real ice and snow. Once one managed to break through to the spiritual ocean tier, they could release their martial intent out of their bodies and affect the world, forming a solid attack. Every bit of ice and snow shone with a tiny pattern and possessed a terrifying destructive power. Bao Xian Ran had previously underestimated Ling Han. Since he was able to easily free himself from the ice produced by the flag, Ling Han was worthy to die by his hand. Ling Han drew his sword, and the 4 seasons sword technique circulated. The images of spring, summer, autumn, and winter circulated, forming a natural cycle. Bao Xian Ran's attack had martial intent as its basis, so it was obviously stronger, but Ling Han's power was not too much weaker, either. Added together with the fact that the 4 seasons sword technique was a black-grade high-level martial arts technique and possessed formidable power, this was adequate to compensate for his lack of martial intent. Hong, hong, hong. The two of them continuously exchanged blows, and it actually seemed difficult to decide the victor in this short amount of time. Quickly, pinch me. Am I dreaming? How is it possible that I'm seeing a guy in the first layer of the gushing spring tier exchange blows with a spiritual ocean tier elite? Someone mumbled. My eyes must have blurred. Haha, how could this be possible? Fuck, I'm gonna go crazy. Is this really the gushing spring tier? When they saw this scene, aside from the martial artists from the Rain Country, all the others looked like they had gone mad, grabbing their heads and screaming. This was really surreal, wasn't it? A mere martial artist at the first layer of the gushing spring tier was actually able to face a spiritual ocean tier elite head-on and not be at the disadvantage. This was practically a fantasy. Though Hunyao was also in the gushing spring tier, but at least she had not faced Bao Xian Ran head-on and emerged victorious because of her superior speed. This, at least, was still acceptable to them. But in Ling Han's case, he definitely had the aura of the first layer of the gushing spring tier, yet was able to face an opponent in the 5th layer of the spiritual ocean tier head-on and exchange blows with him. This was practically enough to blind their dog eyes. The gushing spring tier could actually be this powerful. Not just Ling Han, but also Hunyao. Neither was at a disadvantage when they faced Bao Xian Ran and showed perfectly what a monster was and what a freak was. You guys don't know yet, right? He's Ling Han. Someone from the Rain Country declared. What? He's Grandmaster Ling, Earth-grade Alchemist. That's right. How could that be? He looks to be only about 16 or 17 years old. Aya, I'm really going to go crazy. A young man 16 or 17 years old is not only capable of facing a spiritual ocean tier opponent head-on, but is also an Earth-grade alchemist. I have always been praised as a genius, but why is it that when I compare myself to him, I feel like an idiot? I'm an idiot too. Idiot here as well. Everyone sighed. At first, they had all felt they were quite capable, always feeling that no matter what, they could still be considered quite powerful amongst the younger generation. But they had only found out now that they were merely ignorant and thought too highly of themselves. On the other side, Hunyao had naturally bit her way out of the ice, trapping her. However, when she saw Ling Han was currently embroiled in a furious battle with Bao Xian Ran, she had decided not to rush in and join the battle. She had a very strong sensitivity about battles and knew that Ling Han had not displayed his full battle prowess yet, so he was definitely able to win. As a result, she had naturally chosen not to interfere. Bao Xian Ran was shocked. He was genuinely in the 5th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and his opponent was clearly only in the 1st layer of the gushing spring tier. Yet the latter possessed battle prowess that was not the slightest bit weaker than his. How could he accept this reality? What if his opponent also broke through to the spiritual ocean tier? Wouldn't that mean he would be instantly wiped out in a single move? No, he definitely could not allow such a genius to continue living. He leaped up, intending to once again activate the flag to freeze Ling Han solid and thus kill him easily. You're planning on using the same trick twice. Ling Han smirked coldly. He had accumulated enough power for mysterious 3,000 and was ready to strike at any moment. This powerful move merely needed the time equivalent for 3 breaths to prepare, and so was very quickly ready. Bao Xian Ran's hand had already touched the flag. He wanted to pull out the flag and use it as a weapon to sweep at Ling Han. If Ling Han was actually struck in this way, he would first be frozen solid, then shattered by the powerful force of the attack. That naturally meant a thorough death. Hong, for flashes of light from the sword shone at the same time. One flash was the real sword, whereas the other 3 were sword chi. Then they evolved into a total of 400 sword flashes that blasted towards Bao Xian Ran. A powerful shock and extreme fear shone from Bao Xian Ran's eyes, and he hurriedly pulled out the flag to parry this attack. Pu, piu, piu, piu. As the sword flashes washed over without restraint, it produced a world-shaking effect. Bao Xian Ran stumbled back in retreat. His whole body was covered with wounds, and a large number of them were bone-deep, exposing the scary white of his bones. He had completely lost every bit of his previous demeanor. However, since he was able to parry the mysterious 3,000 and not die, he could be considered quite capable. The battle flag had blocked a large portion of the attack. Otherwise, he would still be dead. Chapter 304, Becoming an Idol. Chapter 304, Becoming an Idol. Everyone was astonished, and those like Lian Xiu, Zhu Baiyuquan, and the others were filled with embarrassment. How could they not be? They all thought of themselves as geniuses of their generation that could only be rivaled by a rare few in their age range, all filled with an absolute confidence, thinking that if they really put all their effort into the battle, they were definitely capable of obtaining the final victory. But Bao Xian Ran's appearance had naturally dealt a heavy blow to their self-confidence. They were both in their mid-20s, but Bao Xian Ran was already in the middle stage of the spiritual ocean tier, and the gap between them and him was extraordinarily big. But that was fine, because Bao Xian Ran came from the Coldwater sect, which was a great party, so it was reasonable that they could not compare to him. However, Ling Han actually managed to exchange successive blows with Bao Xian Ran, and that was already enough to give them a jaw-dropping shock. Yet he now succeeded in heavily injuring Bao Xian Ran with a single slash. This made them have no choice but to admit the fact that they had been extremely ignorant in the past. If they actually found out this one strike was not Ling Han's full power, as he had only launched 400 sword flashes, their facial expressions would probably be even uglier. What was even more horrifying was the fact that Ling Han was also an Earth-grade alchemist. Would anyone actually dare to believe this? Ling Han smiled calmly. He had not put his full effort into the strike because he had not wanted to become completely weakened after he had launched this attack. That feeling was really much too unpleasant. Moreover, Bao Xian Ran was not that powerful, so there was no need to use 800 sword flashes to deal with him. Though Bao Xian Ran was still standing upright, he was continuously coughing up blood. His whole body was shaking, and a large part of the flesh and blood on his limbs had been torn off by the blow, so it was enough of a feat for him to even remain standing. He held tightly onto the flag, as he was only able to remain standing with the support of the flag. Who exactly are you?" he asked defiantly. How was it that someone in the first layer of the gushing spring tier was so strong? For someone who is about to lose their life, what is the point of knowing so much? Ling Han said coldly, "You dare kill me?" Bao Xian Ran laughed coldly. "I am a disciple of the Coldwater sect. If you dare to kill me, the powerful elites of my sect will definitely raze the country you are from to the ground. The pride of a great sect cannot be violated. I'm afraid you are going to be disappointed, because I am also an Earth-grade alchemist. Do you think that the members of the Coldwater sect will offend me, an Earth-grade alchemist, for the sake of a mere disciple like you?" Ling Han asked calmly. Previously, though they had all been talking about it, Bao Xian Ran had been engaged in a furious battle with Ling Han. So how could he have heard when he had his full concentration on the fight? His first reaction upon hearing this now was that Ling Han had to be joking. How could it be possible that there would be such a young, earth-grade alchemist in this world? "That's impossible," he said immediately. "You need not bother about that any more. Obediently lay beneath the ground. In your next life, you should not be so overbearing, particularly when you're in front of me." Ling Han's sword pierced out. He had no plans to leave Bao Xan Ran alive to make trouble for him later on. Damn it! Though Bao Xan Ran was injured, his internal and vital organs were not injured. He put all his effort into activating the flag and swept it towards Ling Han. Hoo, hoo, hoo! The flag waved and swept out a freezing cold wind, capable of freezing someone to death. Hung! The strange fire circulated by Ling Han's side and provided a layer of fire to shield him, dispersing the cold air that was sweeping towards him. Thus, the greatest effect of this flag was rendered useless. Ling Han struck repeatedly. His battle prowess was higher than Bao Xan Ran's, and the latter was unable to stand against Ling Han even after using the flag. So how could he block his subsequent attacks? Within a few moves, his throat was slashed by Ling Han's sword. As blood spurted out from his wound, he fell onto the ground loudly. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Not too long ago, he was as disdainful as a god looking upon mortals, and killed them as if they were mere grass. But just how long ago had that time been that he would suffer a similar fate now? Ironic, it was really too ironic. He opened his eyes wide in defiance, trying his best to retain this piece of the sky in his sight, but the only scene left for him was darkness. "My master will definitely avenge me." He left behind these last words, and filled with a longing for life, breathed his last. "Ling Han! Grandmaster Ling! Grandmaster Ling is mighty! Long live Grandmaster Ling!" The whole plaza was completely lit on fire. Young people would not have so many worries or thoughts. They only knew that an outsider had come and suppressed them so much that no one dared raise their heads, and it was Ling Han who had stepped out and defeated this outsider. This outsider slaughtered them without any bit of hesitation, and in the end was killed by Ling Han without mercy. As the saying goes, a tooth for a tooth and blood for blood. They were overjoyed. In comparison, what could Cheng Fei Jun count as? As a black-grade high-level alchemist, he did not even manage to suppress a martial artist of the spiritual ocean tier. That was practically a joke. This was a bit unjust to Cheng Fei Jun. Because the great sects usually had their own in-house alchemists, they were basically able to satisfy the needs for alchemical pills of their own disciples, and would only make requests to the Alchemists Association for certain special pills. However, in ordinary cases, they would be able to solve the problem by simply making a trip to the Spirit Treasures Pavilion and taking part in an auctioneer. Thus, the great sects were merely wary of the combined force of the Alchemists Association. But because they did not have a direct need of external alchemist services, they did not attach too much importance to alchemists. For examples, Feng Yan could declare his intention to cripple Ling Han's legs without care. As long as he did not kill Ling Han, the Alchemist Association would not come forward in Ling Han's defense. After all, the great sects would be wary of the Alchemist Association, but the Alchemist Association would not easily turn hostile against the great sects either. Naturally, the status of an earth-grade alchemist was much higher. Any sect would gladly treat one as honored guest, and if they actually managed to invite one such alchemist to stay with them as a respected elder, that would mean a great boost to the sect's own ability. Cheng Fei Jun's face was completely ashen. He was the one who had organized this martial arts tea party and had even disregarded his hard-earned capital and took out a restore heart pill, but now great. Ling Han had instead become the brightest star now, so much that even he, the organizer, was actually set to one side and ignored. This damn guy, why was he not dead yet? No, he had to make another visit to Luo Jifeng again tonight and convince him to act no matter what. Ling Han was all smiles as he said, "Everyone, please don't forget to come to Pleasure Come In." There is still a large supply of 100-year-old ginseng and Ganoderma, as long as you possess enough origin crystals. There'll be enough for everyone. Ha 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 ha. Everyone laughed loudly. At first, Earth-grade alchemists were high, noble people, as they were big bosses that were even higher in status than the ruler of a nation. Yet, someone like that would actually come down to their level and peddle goods. This had really shortened the distance between such an esteemed person and common people like themselves. Will definitely come to help out with Grandmaster Ling's business. If we're really being honest, we're the ones making a huge profit, since we can actually purchase 100-year-old ginsengs and Ganoderma. Thank you, Grandmaster Ling. Everyone expressed their thanks sincerely. After all, as long as a spiritual ocean tier warrior was willing to actually refine them, they could produce origin crystals at any time. But how could 100-year-old ginseng and Ganoderma be so easily obtained? Even if their clans were willing to set up a spirit field to cultivate these plants, they would take a long time to be ready for harvest and would only benefit their descendants. Moreover, this kind of spirit herbs had extremely strict requirements of their environment. To reach the 100-year age, who knew how much effort and sacrifice had to go into cultivation, it was not merely the passing of 100 years' time. Thus, even for the colossal entities like the imperial families, even if they had their own herb gardens, it was already shocking enough to have 30 or 50-year-old spirit herbs, such as ginseng. Where would they be able to obtain 100-year-old ginseng? This move of Ling Han not only helped him earn a large amount of origin crystals, but also win the appreciation and gratitude of the younger generation of the 9 nations. This was truly the case of idly poking a stick into the ground and ending up with a tree that grew just to provide shade for you. An unintentional action brought to Ling Han an unexpected success, which was enough to make Cheng Fei Jun die of envy. Chapter 305, The Next Step. Chapter 305, The Next Step. Cheng Fei Jun had organized this martial arts tea party, firstly to select some outstanding geniuses Luo Jifeng would recruit them. Secondly, he wanted to establish his individual reputation and name. When he stepped out later to personally convince them, his identity as a black-grade high-level alchemist would naturally make it easier to convince them to join. However, Cheng Fei Jun had now been completely left behind and forgotten in a corner, whereas Ling Han gained everyone's approval and gratitude. This really made Cheng Fei Jun fume in fury. Who asked him to retreat at the most crucial moment? In the world of martial arts, even if your ability was weak, if you actually battled with all your effort and died, others would still give you a thumbs up and proclaim you as a real man. However, if one were to flee without even daring to put up a fight or cower from the battle in public, that was an act that would engender disdain the most. Ling Han clasped his fists together and returned with Liu Yutong and the others back to the inn. On the way there, Liu Yutong and Li Sichan were still recalcitrant, saying that since Ling Han had obtained the first place, he should have asked Cheng Fei Jun for that Restore Heart pill. This made Ling Han laugh loudly, as well as made him feel disdainful. Just think, the one and only alchemy emperor, how could it be that he would still need to take the low-quality, trash pill concocted by a black-grade high-level alchemist? That was really too much of a joke. Not long after they had returned to the inn, customers surged forth like clouds. Zhu Wujiu was already very busy, and Guang Yuan and Qin Yi went to help him as well. Later, not just the younger generation of the 9 nations of the desolate north came forth with their original crystals, but even quite a number of alchemists from the Star Brilliance Palace Hall came when they heard the news. Anyone who had yet to break through to the flower-blossoming tier was mortal, and a mortal's lifespan was merely as long as 100 years, so who would not want to live for a few years longer? The more power these elders possessed, the more they treasured their lives, were willing to make any sacrifice as long as they could live for a few years longer. The effects of 100-year ginseng and Ganoderma were not to the point they could defy logic, but no matter what, they would help extend one's lifespan a bit, so it would be definitely no issue for one to live another 3 or 5 years. Moreover, These items were extremely nutritious and could help heal hidden injuries, which was equivalent to extend one's lifespan. Lu Yutong and Li Xichan had taken the position of housewives and stood at one side, cheerfully counting the origin crystals, which gained Hunyou's disdain. She secretly thought, these two silly girls, what was so nice about looking at origin crystals? The right thing to do was to stick to Ling Han instead. After a day of business, Ling Han had gathered a terrifying amount of 100,000 origin crystals. This was a wealth that would make anyone envious. It was guaranteed that even the imperial family of the Rain Country would only be able to produce a mere scrap of this amount at most. The auction was also going to take place soon. In another 2 days it would begin. And on the other side, with the help and urging from 3 Earth-grade alchemists, Ling Han's verification as an Earth-grade alchemist would also be completed soon. At most, in another 5 days, the proof of his identity would be delivered. Ling Han was very satisfied and began to consider where he would go next. The Star Brilliance Palace Hall was only a stopover point for him on his way out of the desolate north, so he naturally would not be staying for too long here. But since he was here, he decided to simply verify his status as an Earth-grade alchemist, which would ensure that he would be able to do as he liked. Now that these 2 issues were almost solved, his next stop would naturally have to be moved up the schedule. The Winter Moon sect was planning to open their doors to recruit disciples. After Ling Han heard this news from others, he considered for a moment, then decided to head to the Winter Moon sect. Firstly, he had to investigate his mother's whereabouts. Secondly, he wanted to collect some interest there. For such a great sect like the Winter Moon sect, they definitely had their own herb farm, and Ling Han planned to empty this farm to enrich the space inside the Black Tower. Who asked this sect to capture his mom and injure his dad? If he didn't avenge himself, could he even be considered human? When he had enough ability, he would naturally kill Ao Feng and end this enmity completely. And they'd go to the Winter Moon sect. However, he would have to hide his identity. Otherwise, based on the fact that he and Feng Yan were deadly enemies, even if that elite of the spiritual infant tier did not kill him because he was an Earth-grade alchemist, he would still chase Ling Han out. By then, how was he to take over the Winter Moon sect's herb farm? Because they had spent all their origin crystals and the martial arts tea party was already over, quite a number of young men and women did not wait for the auction to begin, but instead chose to set out directly and head towards the Winter Moon sect. However, out of those who set out, some traveled a certain distance ahead but then actually came back. They had deliberately returned to see Ling Han and told him a piece of news. On their way, they had seen a few young people coming over from the northern region. Could they be just like Bao Xanran? Ling Han thanked them, and these people once again set out on their journey. Ling Han could not help but feel rueful. He had only killed Bao Xanran because of a conflict of interests brought about by the latter, and had not considered much else. However, he had actually gained the hearts of so many as a result. Otherwise, they had already left, so why would they deliberately come back and tell him the news? But based on the fact that they managed to leave freely, he knew that the newcomers should be different from Bao Xanran. Otherwise, these people would have robbed and killed them rather than let them leave. Could it be that they were here to participate in the auction? This was quite possible. After all, there was at least one blue-scale demonic fruit on auction, so it was natural that those nearby would be attracted to come. At midnight, that feeling of being observed came back again. Ling Han knew that it was definitely Luo Jifeng. It was not the first time that old guy had done this kind of thing, but with Ling Han's eye of truth, he had absolutely nowhere he could hide. However, Ling Han soon looked solemn, because Luo Jifeng actually wore a veil to conceal his face today. Since he was trying to hide himself, he was obviously planning to do something bad. Obviously, Ling Han had not given him the chance to act previously, which finally made that old guy lose patience. Had decided to make a move even if Ling Han was at the inn. Ling Han hesitated. Should he immediately retreat into the Black Tower? If he retreated into the Black Tower, then he would definitely be safe, but he still had one chance for the Black Tower to instill power into him, and he was currently in the 9th layer of the Gushing Spring Tier. So, as soon as he strengthened his foundations so firmly that they could not be shaken, he would attempt to break through to the Spiritual Ocean Tier. If he still did not use this chance, that would mean a complete waste of it. Most importantly, the Black Tower instilling power into him was a process of strengthening and refining his body, which was extremely beneficial to him. Thus, he definitely could not miss this opportunity. Small Tower had also said that the later the chance for instilling power was used, the better it would be. He was now in the 9th layer of the Gushing Spring Tier. There was no later than this. With the installation of power, he would be able to possess the cultivation of the 9th layer of the Spiritual Ocean Tier. And with his monstrous battle prowess, the 9th layer of the Spiritual Ocean Tier would be enough for him to battle an opponent of the Spiritual Pedestal Tier. Although the higher one's cultivation, the more difficult it would be to battle an opponent at a stronger cultivation level. But there should be no problems against an opponent in the 2nd or 3rd layer of the Spiritual Pedestal Tier. After all, Luo Jifeng was only in the 3rd layer of the Spiritual Pedestal Tier. If he fully used the mysterious 3000, he should be able to have the chance to kill him in a single strike. After he made his decision, Ling Han immediately moved quietly. He left the inn and headed towards a dark location at a far-off area. With Luo Jifeng's senses and divine sense of someone in the Spiritual Pedestal Tier, he naturally discovered instantly Ling Han's departure. The old man could not help but be slightly stunned. How could there be such a coincidence? He had just planned to kill Ling Han, even if it meant revealing his identity, when this brat actually left the inn alone and created an opportunity for him. Odd. However, there was no way he could resist such temptation. In his mind, there was no way someone at merely the 1st layer of the Gushing Spring Tier could become a threat to him. The old man leaped forth and flew after Ling Han, closely tailing him. He planned to catch up to him in a remoter location and kill him. Firstly, this would solve a problem for Chung Fei-jun, and secondly, he still had to draw out the strange fire. Otherwise, there was no possibility that Chung Fei-jun would be able to take over the position of leader in the Star Brilliance Palace Hall. After only over 10+ minutes, did Ling Han suddenly stop. It was precisely at the plaza that had hosted the martial arts tea party the day before. There was still a large number of Sun's hides that had yet to be dismantled here, and it was dark all around, as if it was a ghost town. This was indeed a good place to commit murder. It was very spacious. Chapter 306, Battling the Spiritual Pedestal Tier. Chapter 306, Battling the Spiritual Pedestal Tier. Old man, come on out. You followed me for so long. You should come out to take a breath of fresh air, Ling Han said, turning around. Luo Jifeng continued to hide himself and did not step out at the first instance. He thought that Ling Han was trying to bluff. How could a brat in the 1st layer of the Gushing Spring Tier possibly discover his tracks? So, you can be shameless as long as there's a cloth covering your face? Ling Han snorted. Luo Jifeng was instantly furious, and at the same time he realized that Ling Han had discovered him. He strode out and asked, "Brat, how did you discover me?" "I guessed," Ling Han said simply. "I vaguely felt that there was a beetle behind me, and thinking it over, someone who would be following behind another in the middle of the night, like this, must be a shameful old wretch." Luo Jifeng fumed angrily because of his invectives and shouted in fury, "How dare you!" "Hee, I am usually very daring," Ling Han smiled. Luo Jifeng instantly calmed down. An elite of the Spiritual Pedestal Tier naturally could not lose composure like this. He crossed his arms behind his back and asked, "Brat, you probably don't know my cultivation level yet, right?" "The Spiritual Pedestal Tier." He did not wait for Ling Han to make a guess, and simply revealed the answer. "I heard that you dared to kill even a man in the 5th layer of the Spiritual Ocean Tier." This has probably made you smug and conceited. And so you think that I'm also the same, right? You're wrong. Whether it is the spiritual pedestal or the spiritual ocean tier, there's no way you can tell the difference between cultivation levels. And this is precisely going to be the reason for your death. There are some people you can't offend, and once you do, your only fate would be death. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "So it is an old wretch in the spiritual pedestal tier. Sorry I didn't recognize you. I am indeed quite curious. Cheng Fei Jun is actually able to command an old wretch like you. So from the look of things, you don't have much to be proud of." "Nonsense. Cheng Fei Jun is the one who has to obey my commands." Luo Jifeng immediately rebuked, but once the words left his mouth, he could not help but tense up and say sharply, "Damn you! You actually dared to trick me with words!" Ling Han shrugged and said, "You're here to kill me anyways. Moreover, a battle between the spiritual pedestal tier and the gushing spring tier would definitely be a one-sided domination. I am someone who is definitely going to die. So what if I know some secrets? Old wretch, let me ask you, which party are you really from?" Luo Jifeng was dazed from listening to Ling Han's words. The first words that Ling Han had said were obviously supposed to be his lines. Yet why had they come from Ling Han's mouth? Though this was a fact, it still made him feel extremely uncomfortable. A man who was well aware that he was going to die could still remain so calm. Yet when he heard Ling Han's last few words, the old man was once again enraged. This brat still dared to call him an old wretch. "What is the point for a dead man to know so much?" he asked coldly. Being called old wretch repeatedly by Ling Han made him feel like he couldn't bear to immediately kill Ling Han. He wanted to toy with the latter for a while before killing him slowly. Ling Han laughed and said, "A wretch will be a wretch, never listening to nice words. Only brute strength works." "Damn you!" Luo Jifeng humphed in anger. He really could not bear being repeatedly insulted as old wretch by Ling Han, so he planned to first subdue this brat, then slowly torture him. At the same time, recovering the strange fire was quite a troublesome task. Cheng Fei Jun had to be at the scene as well, so he had better first subdue Ling Han. "Small tower," Ling Han said lightly. Suddenly, a terrifying power gushed out of his dantian and instantly circulated through his entire body. First layer of the spiritual ocean tier, second layer, third layer. His cultivation level spiked up sharply, and in a short while reached the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. Luo Jifeng was just about to make a move when he suddenly ceased all movement and said in an utterly astonished tone, "Impossible! Impossible! How can your aura instantly soar up to the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier?" From the first layer of the gushing spring tier to the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, that was practically a breach through 2 major tiers. It was shocking to the point of being horrifying. Who could accept this? "What is the point for a dead man to know so much?" Ling Han asked. This was exactly what Luo Jifeng had said to him in reply before. Luo Jifeng had already regained his senses from his absolute astonishment earlier. He said, "So what if you are in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier? There is still a gap of a major tier, and to suppress you would be a complete piece of cake for me. I definitely do not believe that in this tiny place like the desolate north, there could be a 17-year-old in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier who at the same time is also an earth-grade alchemist. You must have taken some kind of alchemical pill which has temporarily raised your cultivation level. You would only possess the strength through this kind of upgrade. It is impossible for your martial arts comprehension to have increased as well. You would at most be able to only express the battle prowess of the 3rd or 4th layer. In front of me, such battle prowess is practically trash," he said disdainfully. Ling Han's right hand moved, and a sword appeared out of thin air. This was no ordinary iron sword, but the demon birth sword. Today, he was definitely not going to spare Luo Jifeng. This, what kind of spirit tool is this? Luo Jifeng's expression went through a dramatic change. Even if the martial intent in the demon birth sword had not been restored, a level 10 spirit tool was still a level 10 spirit tool, after all. Merely one look at the patterns engraved on the body of the sword would arouse a powerful feeling of hopelessness, as if one was facing an ultimate elite standing at the apex of strength. Level 10 spirit tool, demon birth sword, Ling Han said calmly. He did not hide anything this time round. Level 10 spirit tool. Level 10 spirit tool. Luo Jifeng mumbled, powerful greed instantly appearing on his face. I understand the basis for your confidence is this demon birth sword. Ha 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 ha, a level 10 spirit tool is indeed powerful, but you have no way to activate the martial intent within it, so at most it would only be a threat to me due to how sharp it is. I have to thank you for gifting me with such an ultimate treasure. Ha ha ha. Only I deserve to have this spirit tool. Is that so? Ling Han extended his left hand, and with a mental command, wang, veins appeared on his hand, shining with a colorful light. Pooh! Luo Jifeng instantly choked. This was martial intent, the genuine thing. How could this be? How could this be? He was instantly driven mad. If one used an alchemical pill to forcibly upgrade one's own cultivation level, that would only mean a strength upgrade. It was not possible for martial arts cultivation to be upgraded as well. Could it be that Ling Han was really in the spiritual ocean tier, yet he had only forcibly suppressed his cultivation level previously? Yet a 17-year-old spiritual ocean tier martial artist who was also an earth-grade alchemist. No matter how he looked at it, it was nonsense. How could there be such a monster in this world? No matter how he dared to contemplate, he could never imagine that Ling Han's soul used to belong to an ultimate elite of the heaven tier, who was the alchemy emperor. Thus, not just earth-grade alchemist, he could even immediately transform into a heaven-grade alchemist. And as long as there was enough power with his divine sense of the heaven tier, how could it be that he could not form martial arts intent? Ling Han lightly shook the demon birth sword. One, the precious sword shone, and two patterns gave off a faint light. This meant that he had managed to revive a portion of the martial intent in the demon birth sword. Even if it was only a little bit, how awesome was a level 10 spirit tool? A terrifying might washed over him, instantly causing Luo Jifeng's heart to tremble like crazy. His legs weakened so much that he had almost fallen to his knees on the ground. Previously, merely the decree of a spiritual infant tier elite was enough to make Fu Yuansheng and the other two spiritual pedestal tier elites only capable of resistance, but unable to make a move. A level 10 spirit tool was naturally even more awesome. Unfortunately, Ling Han was only able to activate two patterns after all. Moreover, they were only faintly shining, so the martial intent released from them was too limited. As a result, Luo Jifeng still managed to keep a large part of his battle prowess. I shall accept such a precious sword as my own. Luo Jifeng was astonished, but at the same time he was even more excited. Chapter 307. Kill just the same. Chapter 307. Kill just the same. Luo Jifeng was extremely astonished, because Ling Han was actually capable of reviving a level 10 spirit tool. Though it was only a little bit, it was already enough of a shock. However, he also thought that if even Ling Han was capable of reviving a level 10 spirit tool, then what about him? If this demon birth sword fell into his hands, it would definitely be able to express even more powerful might. This was a level 10 spirit tool. Ha 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 ha. I shall accept this kind of precious tool as my own. He laughed loudly and stretched out a large hand to grab Ling Han. A black cloud expanded and numerous skulls appeared within it. It was as if the door to hell had been opened and innumerable spirits of the dead had exited. Ling Han suddenly understood and exclaimed, "So you are from the Thousand Corpse sect, No wonder your aura felt familiar. What? Luo Jifeng was flabbergasted. How could you possibly know of the existence of our sect? Nonsense! You've already used the secret arts of the Thousand Corpse sect right in front of my face. If I still can't recognize it, then what is the use of having this pair of eyes? Ling Han snorted. Luo Jifeng was extremely depressed. There had been no signs of the Thousand Corpse sect for tens of thousands of years. Moreover, in the last 10,000 years, their martial arts suffered a tremendous blow, leading to a lapse in their inheritance. There shouldn't be anyone who would be able to recognize the secret arts of the Thousand Corpse sect in this era. Yet how could this brat from out of nowhere recognize it with a single look? Brat, it seems that there are a lot of secrets you're hiding. Very quickly, his eyes shone with a strange light. A 17-year-old who was an Earth-grade alchemist and simultaneously in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, this could no longer be described as merely a miracle. He even later took out a level 10 spirit tool and even managed to recognize the secret arts of the Thousand Corpse sect with a single look. He definitely had to be hiding a colossal secret. His heart throbbed wildly. If he was able to capture Ling Han, who knows, it might be the greatest chance in his entire lifetime. Don't dream such wonderful fantasies. It's impossible, Ling Han shook his head. You know what I'm thinking. Nonsense. Just look at how you're practically salivating. How could it not be obvious what kind of devious ideas you're contemplating? Ling Han said with a derisive snort. Luo Jifeng naturally had not lost so much composure that he was salivating. He gave a humph. At this moment, the surroundings were completely covered by his black qi. One after another, skulls rolled over and over, making him feel very confident in himself. Brat, when I take you down, not only will I gain your fated opportunity, you will also be tortured incredibly at my hand. I can guarantee that you will be utterly miserable. Ling Han snorted and sneered. Just a damn eunuch who has no D*** between his legs? No wonder you have a catamite. Since you're cultivating the evil arts of the Thousand Corpse sect, your body is like a mummy, so your D** has naturally rotted and you can only sell your behind. You! Luo Jifeng felt as if his heart had been dealt a heavy blow. His face twisted, and he suddenly gave an enraged roar, as if he was a ghost himself. Instantly, innumerable skulls appeared and pounced towards Ling Han. This was his greatest pain. As a man, he had lost his D***, and now that Ling Han had exposed this fact right in front of his face, this instantly drove him to extraordinary depths of fury. Damn wretch! I have yet to call you to account for this. You almost made me blind. Ling Han released a sharp whistle and waved the demon birth sword, using the sword technique of mysterious 3000. 700 sword flashes moved at the same time. With the driving force of the demon birth sword, every sword flash actually transformed into a black armored knight formed from demonic qi that charged towards Luo Jifeng in attack. Fuck! Ling Han was instantly stunned. Each of these black-armored knights were at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. 700 of these black-armored knights moving at the same time. What kind of concept was that? Even he himself had never imagined that the mysterious 3000 combined with the demon birth sword would actually create such a terrifying might. Of course, this was also because with the installation of power from the Black Tower, his power had soared to the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. He had even deliberately kept 100 sword flashes in reserve in order to spare Luo Jifeng's life. He would not be able to interrogate him otherwise. But who would have thought that the might of this strike was practically capable of defying logic? 700 black-armored knights rushed past. Not only was the corpse qi that was all around completely dispersed, all the skulls were completely shattered as well. Luo Jifeng had died without a whole body, leaving behind not even a single scrap. Luo Jifeng might not even be able to resist merely one black-armored knight of the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. What more when 700 of such powerful beings assaulted him at the same time? AI. Ling Han sighed. This was great. He had directly killed Luo Jifeng. So all the trails were broken. His thoughts took a turn. I'll go look for that scholar boy. He returned quickly. When he arrived at Luo Jifeng's courtyard, he grabbed the scholar boy in a single move. He knocked the latter unconscious and stored him in the Black Tower. Then he too flashed into the Black Tower and began his interrogation. I was forced. The scholar boy was scared half to death and filled with even more incomprehension and fear about the space inside the Black Tower. No matter how Ling Han asked, he said he didn't know anything. He had only been taken in by Luo Jifeng after the latter had come to the town. At first, he thought that he had met his benefactor, but the result was he was also disgusted. As a result, he always used brute force, wanting to torture Luo Jifeng. Yet that only made the old wretch even more pleased. Ling Han could only once again knock the scholar boy unconscious and toss him out of the Black Tower. This trail was not broken yet because Cheng Fei Jun was still alive. He made the scholar boy ask Cheng Fei Jun over to Luo Jifeng's courtyard. In order to make the scholar boy obey his commands, he simply stuffed an alchemical pill into the latter's mouth and forced him to swallow it. Ling Han lied and said that it was poison, and if the scholar boy was not given the antidote in 3 days, he would die. The scholar boy was not the slightest bit doubtful. Because Luo Jifeng had not returned all this while, he felt that it was very possible that the former had already been killed by Ling Han. When he thought that even such a terrifying person like Luo Jifeng had been dealt with by Ling Han, how could he dare to resist? Not long after, a sound arose from the doors to the courtyard, and the sounds of 2 pairs of footsteps approached. How could it be you? When Cheng Fei Jun saw Ling Han, he could not help but look extremely astonished. No matter whom he saw, it would not be as unacceptable to him as seeing Ling Han here. Ling Han humphed and said, I am the elder in charge of discipline. Why do you not kneel upon seeing me? Cheng Fei Jun was dazed by his bluff. After hesitating for a moment, he instantly looked vicious and said, You're bluffing me. Where is Master Luo? Master Luo! He exclaimed in shock. How troublesome! Ling Han moved, and with a single palm strike, knocked him unconscious. Then he turned his eyes towards the scholar boy. I'll do it myself, the scholar boy hurriedly said. He knocked himself into the wall, and with a tong he fainted. He really did know how to conduct himself. Ling Han could not help but break into laughter and stored the 2 of them simultaneously into the Black Tower. He returned to the inn and once again entered into the Black Tower. Then he began to interrogate Cheng Fei Jun. Ling Han, you are really daring. Even if you are an Earth-grade alchemist, but to imprison another alchemist privately, this is still a heavy crime. Cheng Fei Jun called out sternly once he awoke. When has even a dreg of the 1,000 Corpse sect become so arrogant? Ling Han shook his head. What nonsense are you spouting? Who's a dreg of the 1,000 Corpse sect? Cheng Fei Jun's expression changed drastically. Yet he turned about and asked Ling Han, Speak less nonsense and quickly let me go. Now that you've entered into my space, you still want to leave. Ling Han smiled calmly. His body rose up into midair, and with a casual wave of his hand, a large hill sprouted out of the ground, forming a change in their environment. Pooh! Cheng Fei Jun instantly choked, his eyes fixed in a stare, as if he had become an idiot. This is an illusion! This is an illusion! He mumbled to himself, his whole body trembling. Pah! Ling Han delivered a sharp slap, and the pain immediately made Cheng Fei Jun cry out in pain. This was definitely no illusion. Chapter 308 The 1,000 Corpse Sect's Plans. Chapter 308 The 1,000 Corpse Sect's Plans. Cheng Fei Jun was struck awake by this smack, and the look he directed towards Ling Han was filled with terror. Being able to soar in the skies, physically, the flower blossomed here. The flower blossomed here, someone who had transcended the mortal world and possessed power that could not be comprehended logically. Thus, this had to be an old monster who had lived for 100 or 200 years. As a result, it was nothing odd that he possessed the power of the flower blossomed here, nor was it strange that he had become an earth-grade alchemist, because he had already reached such heights since who knows how many years ago. For such an old monster to deliberately disguise himself as a young man, what were his intentions? You had best explain obediently. Ling Han casually turned a hand, and a force was exerted onto Cheng Fei Jun's body, causing such pain that he immediately exclaimed in agony. In this space, Ling Han was God. Cheng Fei Jun was really quite stubborn. Unfortunately, within the Black Tower, any kind of unimaginable torture method could be immediately brought into reality, and soon enough, Cheng Fei Jun had a mental breakdown. This was practically trying to oppose the will of a god. How could he possibly win? Ling Han actually had other means to obtain the information he wanted, and that was to directly search his soul. For him, who had a sliver of the divine sense of the heaven tiradded with the fact that they were both in the Black Tower, it would be extremely easy to accomplish this. However, the process of searching one's soul would be similar to reading every single experience and the whole history of a man unless it was so coincidental that the information he wanted would be immediately searched out. Since it was to flip through all the memories of another, he would have to go through his experiences as well, and seeing too much of another's experiences would definitely affect him as well. He might lose sight of which life was his, and which was Cheng Fei Jun's. Thus, unless it was absolutely necessary, Ling Han did not want to use soul-searching arts. Moreover, after the soul was searched, the person who had his soul searched would definitely die. This was because his soul had been drawn out of his body and flipped through bit by bit, so it would naturally be completely destroyed. Of course, the most important reason that Ling Han did not want to view Cheng Fei Jun's whole life was to avoid dirtying his eyes. And there was no need to mention Luo Jifeng. His worldview could possibly be completely obliterated. He did not care much about whether Cheng Fei Jun would die or not. After all, even if he did not kill the latter now, he would kill him at a later time anyways. For every question Ling Han asked, Cheng Fei Jun replied. Ling Han was naturally able to distinguish whether he was lying to him or not. Strictly speaking, Cheng Fei Jun was not a member of the Thousand Corpse sect because he had never cultivated corpse chi. About 10 years ago, Cheng Fei Jun was merely an extremely talented newbie in the field of alchemy, but it was right at that time that he was found by a powerful elite of the Thousand Corpse sect who promised him a great reward and pulled him into the Thousand Corpse sect. After a trial period of 3 years, he had obtained ample trust and received a considerable number of ancient pill formulae, and even obtained the personal notebook of an ancient great alchemist, which instantly caused his alchemical skills to sharply improve. Before that, the Thousand Corpse sect did not have him do anything specific, and only required him to improve his alchemical skills as much as possible to prepare for the big business in future. Improving his own alchemical skills was his pursuit in the first place. So Cheng Fei Jun would naturally not refuse. Thus, he began to walk farther and farther, as well as more and more successful on the path of alchemy. About a year ago, the Thousand Corpse sect gave him a strange fire and paid an exorbitant price to help him fuse with it. It was also because of this that he was able to become a black-grade high-level alchemist when he was only in the Gushing Spring tier, and he was just flourishing in the limelight. And it was at this time that he received a mission from the Thousand Corpse sect when Long Yong Chong and the other two passed on. He was to take control of the Star Brilliance Palace Hall. After which, through the authority he possessed, he was to add corpse chi into the medicine that would enter into the 9 nations of the desolate north and transform all of the 9 nations of the desolate north into a land of the dead. If one came into extended contact with corpse chi, A living person would slowly be transformed into a special kind of corpse soldier that would be able to devour other corpse soldiers in order to upgrade their own power. It was similar to raising insects one, and a corpse king would emerge at the end. With the huge numbers living in the 9 nations of the desolate north, this corpse king could possibly be a gold-armored corpse, or even a second-tier gold-armored corpse. As for how to make Long Yong Chong and the other 2 die at the same time, the Thousand Corpse sect would naturally send one of their elites to accomplish this task, so there was no need for Chung Fei Jun to worry about it. What he had to do was to transform the 9 nations of the desolate north into a land of the dead after he had taken over. After understanding the whole story, Ling Han waved a hand and imprisoned Chung Fei Jun anyways. Now that he had entered the Black Tower, his life or death was merely a thought from Ling Han. He could possibly be useful in future, so Ling Han decided to simply imprison him first. He did the same to the scholar boy. At least, only when Ling Han left the Fallen Moon Gorge would he release the latter. This Thousand Corpse sect did not have much relation with Rong Huanxian. It looked like there had been a split in the inheritance of this ancient, great sect. Part of it was inherited by Rong Huanxian, whereas the other part was obtained by another. Moreover, this person was secretly developing it rapidly towards prosperity. He was so ambitious that he planned to kill the 100 million people of the 9 nations of the desolate north and refine a corpse king through this process. This was really deranged. Completely by accident, he actually unraveled such a great evil scheme. It was really a great coincidence and very fortunate. Ling Han was also filled with a bit of lingering fear, because if he had really walked off without a second thought, once Long Yong Chong and the other 2 Earth-grade alchemists died, it was only a matter of course for Chung Fei Jun to rise up and take over. For a small place like the 9 nations of the desolate north, there was actually no need for 3 Earth-grade alchemists to stand by here. It was because the 3 of them had broken through here that they had remained here. In truth, when they had been assigned here, they were only black-grade high-level alchemists. Thus, there was absolutely no problem with the plans of the Thousand Corpse sect. With Chung Fei Jun's current reputation and power, if Ling Han did not step out, who would be able to compete? And if this plan of the Thousand Corpse sect was really put into action, there would practically be no chance for anyone to survive in all the 9 nations of the desolate north. Even with the protection of the new Rain Emperor and the Deyuan King, how could Ling Dongxing and the others possibly be spared? Thus, Ling Han felt lingering fear. If something like that had really happened, even if he destroyed the Thousand Corpse sect 10,000 times, what use was there? He definitely had to destroy this Thousand Corpse sect. Otherwise, even if they failed this time, there would still be a next time and another after that, and he wouldn't be able to guard himself against it. Family was Ling Han's reverse scale. He would definitely not allow anyone harm those close to him. So, Thousand Corpse sect, you should continue to be buried in the dust of history. However, the current Thousand Corpse sect had already reached a massive size, and it was not only through bold words that he could successfully destroy them. Though Luo Jifeng was in the spiritual pedestal tier, he did not have a high position in the Thousand Corpse sect, and Chung Fei Jun was completely unclear about the detailed power scale in the Thousand Corpse sect. If this sect had already been revived for a very, very long time, then it wouldn't be anything strange for them to have one, or even a few ultimate elites of the Shattering Void tier. After all, it was currently a booming era for the martial arts. Moreover, in history, the Thousand Corpse sect had also possessed ultimate elites of the 10th tier as well. Ling Han scratched his head. All the demons and monsters had really appeared in this lifetime. A day later, the auction was held as scheduled. The Spirit Treasure's pavilion status in the Fallen Moon Gorge was not something that could be compared to the Star Brilliance Palace Hall, but the former was similarly established in an extremely large building, which was constructed as a very traditional auction house. It had a total of 5 floors, and was designed in a way that the middle part was empty. This place could at most accommodate 1,000 people at one time, so it couldn't really be considered small. Though Ling Han had not gotten his proof of identity as an Earth-grade alchemist, that was merely an issue of procedure. As a result, he enjoyed the highest level of treatment from the Spirit Treasures Pavilion and possessed a private room on the 5th floor. Long Yong Chang and the other 2 big bosses also arrived. From the look of things, the blue-scale demonic fruit was also very attractive to them. So Ling Han considered whether he should discuss with them and ask them to allow him to have the blue-scale demonic fruit. But what caused Ling Han shock was the fact that there were actually other guests in the private room on the 5th floor. He saw with his own eyes a woman who was completely hidden in a cloak enter into the room. Why was he so sure that it was a woman? When her body moved, that slender waist and plump behind, as well as her towering were completely outlined. Chapter 309, Ling Han of 2 Lives. Chapter 309, Ling Han of 2 Lives. Dark Angel _ Afterwards, an ordinary-looking elder appeared and entered another private room. The most important thing for the Spirit Treasures Pavilion to ensure was fair practice in their business. Thus, since these 2 people were able to enter a private room on the 5th floor, this obviously meant that they, or the party they represented, was at least not weaker than the status of an Earth-grade, low-level alchemist. That elder was in the flower-blossoming tier. Ling Han was a bit surprised. It was indeed quite impressive that the auction today would actually tempt a powerful elite of the flower-blossoming tier to come. A stream of people continued to enter, and soon after, he heard a very distinctive voice. "Fairy Chi, what a coincidence to see you again. We are really fated, so why don't we sit together? From the day before yesterday until now, we've met for a total of 17 times. There were actually as many as 17 times. Then it really seems like we are definitely fated. Fairy Chi, looking at me today, don't you think I'm a little bit more perverted? Get lost." Ling Han glanced out of the window and looked downwards, where he saw Gu Fenghua, who was currently chasing closely behind Qi Hualan. The pervert was grinning happily, eagerly following her. The 2 of them also came upstairs, but they did not come to the 5th floor. Apparently, they were not yet qualified to sit in the private rooms here. As for whether they were on the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th floor, Ling Han did not have so much free time that he would activate the Eye of Truth to determine that. So the outsider martial artists the younger people of the 9 nations of the desolate north had seen were these 2. In the private room, Guang Yuan and the others felt this was really very much a novelty to them. Normally, they were not qualified to enter this kind of private rooms. Even if the decorations and adornments around them were nothing too shocking, they still toured around the room, touching this and that, feeling that everything was uncommon. Lu Yutong and Li Xichan were girls, so they naturally had to take care of their image. As a result, they sat all prim and proper. Hu Niu, on the other hand, did not bother much and continued clinging to Ling Han's arms, laughing. After a while, the auction finally began. Ling Han was bored and leaned forward to sleep. Hu Niu, meanwhile, endlessly teased him with her little hands. The adult and child played joyously and harmoniously, making Liu Tong and Li Xichan, who were watching, feel extremely envious, wanting nothing more than to take Hu Niu's place. The 2 girls exchanged a look and nodded simultaneously. They both felt that they could not be careless just because Hu Niu was little. This little girl could not be underestimated. Moreover, after another 10 years, the little girl should have grown up into a big girl, and it would be too late by that time to guard against her. Guard against fire, guard against thieves, and guard against Hu Niu. Everyone, the item that is going to be presented to all of you now is a treasure from the ancient era and possesses a high symbolic significance, the auctioneer said, spittle flying everywhere. And that is the alchemy furnace that was once used by the inventor of the 3-Fire Guide and acclaimed as the alchemy emperor, Grandmaster Ling Han. Ling Han, Guang Yuan, Lu Yutong, and the others all turned to look at Ling Han. They could naturally tell that this Ling Han was not their Ling Han, but the two of them actually shared the same name, and they were both geniuses of alchemy, so they could not help but be astonished. "Haha, I heard there is also a person here named Ling Han." A cold voice was suddenly heard from one of the private rooms. It was a very old voice. He really doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, to actually dare to have the same name as the alchemy emperor. Haha, he really has overestimated his own abilities. It's nothing strange to have the same name, but how accomplished was Ling Han, Grandmaster Ling, 10,000 years ago? To have the same name as he really deserves to die. This was the voice of a girl. She had a delicate voice, but it was filled with mockery. Though he could not tell which private room these two voices came from, he could confirm they were from the 5th floor, which made Ling Han instantly recall the cloaked woman and the elite of the flower-blossoming tier he had seen earlier. Ling Han did not know whether to laugh or to be angered, because both of them were he, but one Ling Han was praised to the heavens, whereas the other was stepped harshly and crushed underfoot, making him feel like he was trapped between laughter and tears. It was really a coincidence, but who asked the two of them to have the same name? Could it be that small tower had done it deliberately? I don't know who that Grandmaster Ling from 10,000 years ago is, but the current Ling Han is only 17 years old, but is already an Earth-grade alchemist. No matter where, he would deserve the name of a genius of alchemy, and this is still called overestimating his own abilities? Lu Yutong was displeased and immediately began to defend Ling Han. Li Si-chan nodded as well and said, "I am an alchemist too, so I know a bit about that Grandmaster Ling from 10,000 years ago." That Grandmaster became an Earth-grade low-level alchemist only when he was 30. After that, he became an Earth-grade mid-level alchemist 10 years later, Earth-grade high-level 20 years later, and then became a Heaven-grade alchemist 30 years after that. He's also the youngest Heaven-grade alchemist in history. After that, he broke through the limitation of Heaven-grade 50 years later, and was respectfully acclaimed as the Alchemy Emperor. These words were factual, without the slightest bit of exaggeration. It was recorded as such in the ancient records. But when put together with the words that Lu Yutong had said previously, it was more than obvious. 10,000 years ago, Ling Han had only become an Earth-grade alchemist when he was 30 years old. But what about the current Ling Han, 17 years old? Putting aside how his future accomplishment would be like, but merely comparing his current accomplishment, that was definitely slightly superior to the Ling Han of that generation. Thus, the elder and the girl in the two private rooms were instantly silenced. Who asked Ling Han to be indeed much younger than that Ling Han? Yet Ling Han smiled in spite of himself and shook his head. He had all the memories of his last lifetime, which meant that he was standing on the foundations that had accumulated in his last life and continuing to advance from there, so he was naturally going to exceed his previous lifetime. How could these two lifetimes be put together and compared? Still, he was a bit curious. Though the Ling Han of his last life had been acclaimed as the Alchemy Emperor, he had already died for so many years. Why would these two people still be so reverent about him? Most alchemists knew that these two Ling Han shared the same name, but none of them actually came out to rebuke Ling Han. How baffling, and moreover, there were two of them. He, please do not hurt the peace amongst you, esteemed guests. Let us come back to auctioning off this alchemy furnace. Previously, I've said this is the alchemy furnace that was once used by the ancient Grandmaster Ling Han, and the materials used to construct it are excellent. Unfortunately, it is already damaged. Thus, it can only be taken as an ornament and a token of remembrance. The auctioneer hurriedly soothed the atmosphere. He paused, then continued. Something that the ancient Grandmaster Ling has once used is very meaningful. Thus, we can of course not sell it cheaply, or it would be very disrespectful to Grandmaster Ling. Thus, the starting price for this alchemy furnace is 1,000 origin crystals, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000. His words had just fallen, and already there were bidders placing their bids. Listening to the voices, it was Long Yong-chang and the other two big bosses of alchemy. That was true! The name of the ancient Ling Han was too well reputed. The things that he had once used were like totems, a pillar of mental support, and possessed a high symbolic significance for the alchemists of the current time period. Within only a while, the price had soared to 10,000, and it was still rising. Very quickly, the price had broken through the high boundary of 50,000. Ling Han was astonished. Could it be that Long Yong-chang and the others had come for the alchemy furnace he had used before? To be honest, that alchemy furnace was indeed something good. It was forged from purple moon and star's iron, so its heat conduction and pressure resistance was indeed great. Still, it was already damaged, so it could not possibly be used again for pill concoction. And from the looks of it, it was extremely heavily damaged. Even if one would recycle the materials used to make this alchemy furnace, there would not be much left. Thus, the actual value of this alchemy furnace would be around 10,000 origin crystals, but the current bid had already exceeded that sum by a few times. Chapter 310 Fierce Competition. Chapter 310 Fierce Competition. Dark Angel _ This was merely an alchemy furnace that Ling Han had once used before, and now the price of this alchemy furnace that only had symbolic value was still soaring. Soon, it had broken through the high limit of 10,000 origin crystals, but none of the three big bosses of alchemy had any intention to give up and were still continuing to add their bids. It seemed as if they would not give up unless they had emptied all their savings. These three alchemists are truly in love with the Grandmaster Ling Han from 10,000 years ago. Guang Yuan exclaimed ruefully. That's right. It's already over 10,000 origin crystals. How many times has this price exceeded its real values? Zhu Wujie nodded as well. Ling Han's expressions instantly turned dark. He did not need this kind of true love. Lu Yutong and Li Sichan thought that Ling Han was unhappy because he could not compare to the Ling Han from 10,000 years ago, and hurriedly comforted him. Hunyao was more direct. She gave him a kiss on his cheek and giggled. However, Long Yong-chang and the others did not have any intention to give up. The bid soared up to 200,000 and was getting closer and closer to 300,000, making everyone dumbstruck. They were dumbfounded by, firstly, the determination of these three alchemists, and secondly, by how wealthy alchemists were. 300,000 origin crystals. What kind of concept was that? Even for these three big bosses of alchemy, 300,000 origin crystals should be a serious expense. After all, they usually only concocted black-grade alchemical pills, and black-grade alchemical pills were usually sold for silver and gold. Moreover, these three alchemists had to be in the process of trying to break through to become Earth-grade mid-level alchemists. Every time they failed the attempt, what kind of astronomical price would they have to pay for the ingredients they had used? These ingredients definitely had to be bought with origin crystals. Thus, it was indeed impressive that these three alchemists managed to save 300,000 origin crystals, but they had probably reached their limits. Indeed, after the bid had reached 30,000, the three big bosses of alchemy were obviously lacking in confidence. Finally, the price was set at 332,853 origin crystals. Why were there scraps? That was because Long Yong-chang and his companions had really given it their all, and taken out all the origin crystals they had on them. The highest bid had been placed by Li Siyuan. He could not help but look happy. He could finally get hold of the alchemy furnace that was once used by the alchemy emperor. This was a totem and a symbol of significance. "Is there anyone interested in bidding?" the auctioneer asked. He was extremely shocked that the bid reached such a high level, but at the same time it was reasonable to him. His shock was because this was merely a damaged alchemy furnace. But who asked it to be once used by the alchemy emperor? In the eyes of his fans, not just 300,000, even 1 million was worth it. 400,000. It was at this moment that a young, melodic female voice was heard. She placed her bid very calmly, but it gave everyone a shock. That was 400,000 origin crystals, not 400,000 gold and silver coins. Ling Han had heard it very clearly. This girl was precisely one of the two people that had mocked him just now. He had been curious previously, since these two people admired the he from 10,000 years ago. Why did they not even say one word when the auction was ongoing? So it seemed that they were confident of the outcome, and directly played a direct kill. True, after so much bidding, she was naturally aware of the limits of Long Yongchang and the others. Thus the first bid she placed was a direct kill, and she would be able to save as much money as possible. 500,000. Another voice was heard. This one was rough and old. It was precisely the voice of the other person who had mocked Ling Han, previously the elder. 600,000. The girl increased her bid without hesitation, as if this 600,000 was merely paper money. 700,000. The elder did not cower at all. 900,000. This time it was Long Yongchang's voice. The three big bosses of alchemy must have combined forces and pooled their respective origin crystals. 1 million, the girl and the elder spoke up at the same time. 1,500,000. The girl paused a while and directly called out an astronomical price. It seemed like she was an impatient character and did not want to add the bid bit by bit like before anymore. 2 million. The elder was unafraid as well. These were two super rich people. At the beginning, who would have thought that the real competitors for this alchemy furnace would be the two of them? Putting aside their identities, merely the fact that they could take out 2 million origin crystals was enough to qualify them to sit in a private room on the 5th floor. For the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, which was a business establishment, anyone with enough money would be their dad. Ling Han could not help but be rueful and mumbled, "I have used a considerable number of alchemy furnaces by now, so should I consider selling them off as well?" This caused Lu Yutong and Li Xichan to laugh. They thought that he was laughing at himself. There was no way that they would be able to figure out that the two Ling Han were actually one and the same. After the price had reached such a high level, even Long Yongchang and his companions could only become observers. They felt that it was really a pity. That was an alchemy furnace that had once been used by the Alchemy Emperor, and if it could be displayed in the Star Brilliance Palace Hall, that would definitely make this place into the holy land for all alchemists. Yet they did not know that as long as Ling Han once again reached the apex in future, this place, as the important location that Ling Han had broken through to Earth-grade alchemist, would definitely become the holy land for alchemists. 300,000 2 stars origin crystals. The girl once again placed a bid, and it instantly gave everyone a scare. In theory, if the grade of origin crystals was raised, their value would be tenfold, but in truth, no one would be willing to spend high-grade origin crystals like money. Just put it this way, if the same amount of 1-star origin crystals would allow one to successfully break through in 3 years' time, then using the same amount of 2-star origin crystals would only take 1 year. That was right. Time was the most important factor. Especially for those martial artists who were below the flower blossom tier, they only had a lifespan of merely 100 years. Thus, the earlier and the younger they broke through to the spiritual pedestal tier, the more time they would have to attempt breaking through to the flower blossom tier. Once they managed to break through, they would be able to cast off their mortal body. 1-star origin crystals were made by the spiritual ocean tier martial artists, and were extremely helpful to the cultivation of anyone in the body refining, the element gathering, the gushing spring, and the spiritual ocean tier, as they were able to supply enough origin power. However, for those in the spiritual pedestal tier, the effects of 1-star origin crystals would be greatly discounted, and only 2-star origin crystals would have enough effect. And for those in the flower blossom tier, aside from the fact that 1-star origin crystals could be spent like money, they were complete trash. Thus, the higher the grade of origin crystals, not only the better the effects, but also the more the purposes. There were some extremely valuable spirit medicines that not only needed to be purchased with origin crystals, they might even need 4-star, 5-star, or even 6-star origin crystals. Thus, the true value of 300,000 2-star origin crystals far exceeded the value of 300,000 1-star origin crystals. For 100,000 2-star origin crystals, the elder was similarly calm. Everyone was so shocked that their eyeballs looked ready to pop out of their heads. What kind of concept was 400,000 2-star origin crystals? That would need 40,000 spiritual pedestal tier martial artists to work on concocting them for a whole year. In the whole North region, were there even 10,000 spiritual pedestal tier martial artists? Most importantly, these two seemed to be completely calm and looked like they didn't care at all. Were they really from the North region? Ling Han was also very curious. He could still understand if Long Yong Chong and his companions fought over the alchemy furnace. But what were these two fighting over it for? He could not help but activate the Eye of Truth and gazed at them. At first he found the elder, but the latter immediately sensed his presence. He gave a heavy humph, and a sound wave spread out. Woo! Ling Han gave a muffled groan, and instantly a stream of blood gushed out from his right eye. He actually experienced much suffering from this one blow. The flower blossom tear, that was power that exceeded the mortal realm. Ling Han, Lu Yutong, and the others were extremely shocked. Why did he suddenly cry tears of blood out of the blue like this? Only Hunyo fixed a stare at a particular direction in her alertness. It was precisely where that elder was. Obviously, the little girl was not glaring arbitrarily. Instead, she had really sensed something out of the ordinary, and immediately looked vicious. Chapter 311. An Astonishing Discovery. Chapter 311. An Astonishing Discovery. Ling Han held on to Hunyo. That old man was too powerful. Even though Hunyo possessed a terrifying speed, in front of someone in the flower blossoming tier, that would have no effect at all. The latter would only need to release a burst of aura, and that would be enough to kill the little girl with a shock wave. "It's all right," he said with a shake of his head as he withdrew a towel and wiped off the blood. He could feel that his right eye was still faintly aching, but once the indestructible heaven scroll circulated, the pain instantly disappeared. In a mere few minutes, his right eye was completely back to normal. It really deserved the name of the indestructible heaven scroll. Even such a fragile body part like the eye could be easily healed. And after a few minutes of tug-of-war, this alchemy furnace was successfully purchased by that cloaked woman. She paid an astronomical price reaching 1,000,000 2-star origin crystals. With so many origin crystals, as long as I have broken through to the spiritual ocean tier, I would probably be able to break through to the 9th layer in less than a month, right? Ling Han thought. Origin crystals were used to create an environment filled with origin power, which would speed up the rate of cultivation. He once again focused his sight to find that cloaked woman. In a short while he had found her. But what surprised him was that the moment he found that girl, she had coincidentally stood up. Her hands were holding onto the alchemy furnace that she had just successfully purchased, and she was actually planning to leave. In other words, she was purposely here for this alchemy furnace, and now that the alchemy furnace was in her possession, she was naturally going to leave. With the Eye of Truth, Ling Han glimpsed a sliver of her face, and could not help but be slightly awed. This girl was really beautiful, not one bit less beautiful than Chi Hualan. However, whether it was this girl or that elder, they weren't alchemists at all. Ling Han did not sense one bit of the air that an alchemist should possess on them. There was no need to doubt this. As the alchemy emperor, if Ling Han was still unable to distinguish whether someone was an alchemist or not, then he should really buy a piece of tofu and kill himself with it. Two people who were obviously not alchemists, yet were willing to spend over 1 million two-star origin crystals for a damaged alchemy furnace. Why would that be? Previously, they were indeed very reverent towards his previous self. But if one claimed that they would pay such a high price for the sake of their admiration, it was a little incomprehensible. The cloaked woman left, and the elder in the flower-blossoming tier left as well. The two of them shared the same target, which was this alchemy furnace. Now that the alchemy furnace had found its home, they would naturally have no reason to continue staying here. It was really baffling. He could only take them as real rich people who were truly in love with the Ling Han of his last lifetime. After such a major climax, the subsequent proceedings of the auction not only made Ling Han sleepy, there were also a considerable number who had begun to doze off in their seats downstairs. Some were even snoring. Cough, cough! The auctioneer hurriedly adjusted the sequence of the auction and took out a considerably valuable item in advance for the auction, finally managing to make the environment lively again. After another half an hour, an item on auction attracted Ling Han's interest. It was a sculpture that looked like a scorpion. It was completely black all over and exuded a cold metallic light. According to the studies of a few of our experienced appraisers, this should be an antique from 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. There are some ancient words on it, which are slightly different from what we have today. After deciphering, they can roughly be interpreted as Scorpio Palace Hall, life and death, reincarnation for 10,000 lifetimes, the auctioneer said. This should be a token, a key, and it should be able to open the Scorpio Palace Hall of one of the 12 heaven mystery realms. Schwa! His words had just fallen when everyone stood up. All of them looked very excited. The 12 heaven mystery realms were one of the great mystery realms that were rumored to exist. They would open every 100 years, and one would be rendered dumbstruck by the abundant spiritual chi within them. A day of cultivation within could be equal to 10 days or even 100 days of cultivation in the outside world. As a result, innumerable spiritual herbs grew within. Since the mystery realm only opened every 100 years, not only were they mature enough, but due to the spiritual chi within, the quality of these spiritual herbs was shockingly high. But this was not the point. The point was that the 12 heaven mystery realms had 12 mysterious palace halls, and according to the rumor, the greatest treasures of the mystery realm were hidden within cultivation techniques, spirit tools, martial arts techniques, alchemical pills. There was once a fortunate man who entered into the Ares Palace Hall. As a result, his fame soared greatly. In the end, he became an ultimate elite of the heaven tier, and furthermore was one of those extremely strong types. If it wasn't for the fact that the era he was born in was greatly suppressed by the natural environment, which meant that no one in the Shattering Void tier could emerge, his accomplishment would definitely not be limited to the Heaven tier, but he'd enter the Shattering Void tier, or even successfully shatter the Void to become a god. And to enter the 12 palace halls, the corresponding key was needed. According to the examination of our pavilion, this possibly should be the key that will open up the Scorpio Palace Hall, but it could also be counterfeit. Our pavilion cannot be certain of this, because there are some things on this sculpture that we can't confirm. The auctioneer returned back to the main topic. Instantly, a considerable number looked disappointed. When they thought about it, it was logical. If this key was real, then why would it be auctioned off here? If it was taken to the central region, there would be many more rich people there, and it would be able to get a really high price there. Even so, there were still many who were interested in this sculpture. What if it just so happened to be real? Ling Han, do you think it's real or fake? Lu Yutong could not help but ask curiously. Ling Han focused his eyes, and the eye of truth was activated. The form of the sculpture instantly peeled apart in front of his gaze. Every layer disappeared, and when he saw something hidden deep within the sculpture, he could not help but grin because it was actually a piece of paper on which these words were written. You've fallen for the trick. This is a fake, ha ha ha. But when he saw the name written last, he could not help but tremble and wore an expression of disbelief. What is it? Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan asked quickly. It's nothing. Ling Han waved his hand, but everyone could see something was off with his expression. How could Ling Han not lose his composure? Because that was a drawing of a naked woman. He recognized with a single glance that penmanship. It was his showy disciple, Jiang Yufeng. He was not the slightest bit surprised that Jiang Yufeng would do something so pointless. But what shocked him was that this stone sculpture was rumored to be something from 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. But Jiang Yufeng should have been a character from 10,000 years ago. Even if Jiang Yufeng broke through to the shattering void tier, he would only have a lifespan of over 1,000 years. So how could he have managed to survive until 5,000 or 6,000 years ago? Unless Jiang Yufeng advanced yet another step and stepped into the realm of gods, becoming a god himself. Though he didn't know whether gods could be immortal, but just look at Azura Demon Emperor. He had been suppressed for several tens of thousands years and split into 9, but was still alive and kicking, wasn't he? Jiang Yufeng was still alive? Had he become a god? Then what about his 3 other disciples? Were they all still alive? One had to know that the reason that Ling Han had been willing to take the 4 of them as disciples was either because they had astonishing talent in alchemy or logic-defying comprehension abilities in martial arts. Otherwise, for someone like him who had his whole focus on alchemy, how would he have eked out so much time to teach disciples? If Jiang Yufeng was able to become a god, then his other 3 disciples should also be qualified. Then wouldn't he still have a chance to reunite with his 4 disciples? He really wanted to see the expressions on their faces at that time. It would definitely be very interesting. Chapter 312, Consecutive Successes. Chapter 312, Consecutive Successes. Since he now knew that this sculpture was a fake, it was naturally impossible for Ling Han to still place a bid for it. Moreover, he only had about 100,000 origin crystals, which he still had to save to bid for the blue scale, demonic fruit. He took this chance to pay a visit to Long Yongchang and the others to discuss the matter of a loan. After seeing the formidable wealth of the cloaked woman and the flower blossom tier elder, he really did not think that 100,000 origin crystals was in any way a huge sum of money. When they heard the reason why Ling Han needed the blue scale demonic fruit, the 3 big bosses of alchemy all gladly agreed to lend their origin crystals to Ling Han. Of all virtues, filial piety was the most important, and they only made a request in exchange, and that was that they wanted to observe when Ling Han concocted the Restore Spirit pill. That was an earth-grade, mid-level alchemical pill. Ling Han naturally did not mind, so he agreed very easily. The deal was thus made, to everyone's delight and satisfaction. The sculpture gained popularity from a large group of people. Even Gu Fenghua and Qi Hualan made their respective bids for it. There were also some others who should be disciples of the various great clans of the North region, which increased the bidding price drastically. In the end, it was purchased by a man called Su Wintong. At first, the bidders were anonymous, but these visitors from the North region seemed to be very familiar with one another. When they placed a bid, they would not forget to either threaten or challenge their rivals. As a result, many had their identities exposed. This Su Wintong came from the Heaven Origin sect, and seemed to have quite the reputation among the young generation. Consecutively, another spirit tool appeared. This was a saber, and there were 9 hoops on the saber's blade. Upon closer examination, they were not real hoops, but rather intricate patterns, though they looked very much like hoops from their appearance. 9 Hoop Heaven Hero Blade. The auctioneer began to introduce the auction item. This saber is a level 5 spirit tool, but its merit lies in the fact that these 9 hoops are the seals of this spirit tool. One can unseal them one by one, and unseal what is equivalent to only a level 3 spirit tool. Moreover, with every subsequent hoop unsealed, the power of this spirit tool would become slightly stronger and eventually reach level 5. When they heard these words, everyone exclaimed in surprise. In the first place, a level 5 spirit tool was extraordinary, and the power it possessed was enough to oppose a spiritual pedestal tier warrior. But the problem was, how could the martial intent of a spiritual pedestal tier elite be activated by one who was merely in the spiritual ocean tier or the gushing spring tier? As a result, if a high-level spirit tool was in the hands of a martial artist at a lower cultivation level, it would not even be able to display power that corresponded to the martial artist's lower cultivation level. But this spirit tool was a different case. Its power would be slowly unsealed and released in distributed segments, which meant that this spirit tool, in the hands of a gushing spring tier, spiritual ocean tier, or spiritual pedestal tier martial artist, would still be able to display its greatest ability. This was really too powerful. "The starting price is 5,000, the auctioneer announced. Instantly, the sounds of bids were heard throughout. But soon enough, the martial artists from the desolate north were out of the race. Even if they pooled all their origin crystals together, they did not have much remaining. After all, they had just been ruthlessly looted by Ling Han previously, who had earned a total sum of 100,000 from them. Yet Gu Fenghua and the others began to compete. Each of them placed their bids calmly. A mere 12,000 origin crystals was not enough for them to consider seriously. Ling Han swept his eyes over and saw Can Yi look both envious and disappointed. He could not help but laugh and called out loudly, 100,000! Instantly, a complete silence descended. The price now had only just reached 70,000, and you all of a sudden came up with the bid of 100,000. That was absolutely going against the rules. How could anyone increase the bid like that? Meanwhile, Can Yi looked at Ling Han with gratitude. He was naturally aware that Ling Han was a sword user. Then the reason why he had joined the bidding for this treasured saber could only be because Ling Han wanted to let him have it. Can Yi was not very good at expressing himself, so he could only express his gratitude and thanks through his gaze. "Oh, no, our little Yi, you would only be able to pledge himself in marriage in exchange," Guan Yuan said wonderingly. Shua, Lu Yutong, and Li Sichan both struck at the same time, delivering a slash towards Guan Yuan. Sword Qi danced, and Guan Yuan hurriedly leaped away from his original position. The wooden chair he had been sitting in was instantly rent into pieces by the barrage of sword Qi. Pa! He managed to escape Lu Yutong and Li Sichan's strikes, but he forgot there was one other person who knew. The little girl delivered a sharp kick to his behind. She was too fast. Guan Yuan was unable to put up his defenses in time. Instantly, the kick landed solidly on his behind, and he crashed into a wall from the resulting impact. He turned around and saw Hunyeo was currently baring her eerily sharp little white teeth at him. He could not help but feel his heart tremble because Hunyeo was too tiny, and the places that her eyes passed over made him shudder with fear. "Don't shoot your mouth off," both Lu Yutong and Li Sichan said in rebuke. Guan Yuan's face twitched. He naturally did not take these two big girls seriously at all, but he could not possibly guard against Hunyeo. Moreover, she was getting more and more powerful every day and had no comprehension of any kind of rules. Sneak attacks were common for her, so she was definitely a little Maleficent star. There was no way that he wanted to offend her. He had only focused on teasing Can Yi, and had no idea that he had offended Lu Yutong and the other two girls. He was really asking for trouble. Ling Han merely laughed loudly. Meanwhile, after a short period of shock downstairs, the bidding had begun once again, and gradually the price had reached the huge sum of 150,000, though that was still very far from the bidding price for the alchemy furnace previously. But now that those two super rich people had left, this sum had just about reached everyone's limit. 200,000. Ling Han once again raised the bid. He already had enough confidence to successfully get hold of the spirit tool, as well as the blue scale demonic fruit that was coming up later, together with the origin crystals from Long Yongchang and the others. There should be no problem at all. Once this call of 200,000 was heard, the surroundings fell into a complete silence instantly. Why does this voice sound a bit familiar? Gu Feng Hua said to himself, what pervert is that? He's so rich. I need to befriend and cling to him. Though this guy was only speaking to himself, his voice was not low at all, so a large number of people heard him clearly. Ling Han placed his hand on his forehead. He really did not want to be friends with this pervert at all at this moment. Thankfully, this 9-hoop saber eventually fell into Ling Han's possession. With his status, he could completely first collect his goods, then pay the origin crystals owed within a few days. The status of an Earth-grade alchemist was still extremely useful. After another few small items had been placed on auction, the auction was nearing its end as well. It was finally the turn of the blue-scale demonic fruit to be on stage, and this indeed gave rise to another climax. The starting price is 10,000. The auctioneer babbled a bit before finally starting the bidding. 11,000. 12,000. The sounds of bidding rose one after another. Ling Han, meanwhile, sat calmly making no movements. Now was not yet the time to make a bid, and the price was still far from the final price of the blue-scale demonic fruit. Thus, there was absolutely no need to rush things. However, when the price had reached 50,000, the bidding slowed down a bit. After all, the wealth of the alchemists here was mostly in the form of gold and silver. They were only able to produce so many origin crystals through pooling the finances of a considerable number of them. 60,000. The young martial artists from the North region also began to make their bids. They were the real competitors for the higher-priced auction items today. The young people of the 9 nations of the desolate North would only buy some small toys. But in the competition for the real treasures, they were absolutely unable to compete with the martial artists from the North region. The price very quickly spiked up to 150,000 and had once again reached the limit for the martial artists of the North region. 200,000. Ling Han gave the final word. Fuck, why is it him again? This voice sounds quite young. Where did he get so many origin crystals? Don't you guys know? He's Ling Han, Grandmaster Ling, an Earth-grade alchemist that has just broken through. No way, he's the one. I heard he's only 17 years old. This is practically a joke. Don't you guys know that Grandmaster Ling excels both in martial arts and alchemy? Previously, he had even killed a spiritual ocean tier martial artist named Bao Xian Ran at the martial arts tea party. Hiss, at this moment, the young people of the North region all looked astonished. Chapter 313. Help me eradicate the Winter Moon sect. Chapter 313. Help me eradicate the Winter Moon sect. In the eyes of the martial artists from the North region, the 9 nations of the desolate North were the most backward area of the whole land. They didn't even have real elites of the flower blossom tier. Only with the support of the power of the nation did they somehow forcibly possess such powerful existences. Below the flower blossom tier, all were considered powerless mortals. In such a remote and desolate place, the residents were naturally all country bumpkins and boors in their eyes. Yet now there actually appeared a 17-year-old Grandmaster Alchemist here. Moreover, this person was actually capable of killing Bao Xian Ran. Though Bao Xian Ran could not be considered a truly strong person among the younger generation of the North region, he should not have been someone that could be killed by a country bumpkin from the desolate North, either. Moreover, this country bumpkin was only 17 years old, and had also reached Earth grade in terms of alchemy. Did such a genius really exist in this world? Ha 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 ha, so this is Grandmaster Ling. I shall go and see him tomorrow and ask Grandmaster Ling for some guidance. Someone immediately spoke up. I, too, shall shamelessly pay a visit to Grandmaster Ling. So shall I. The young people of the North region exclaimed, respectively. Without bothering to ask for Ling Han's agreement, they declared their intentions to themselves. Since even the last precious auction item had found its owner, everyone naturally left the venue. Anyhow, there are many valuable and precious treasures in this world, and this was only an ordinary auction. No one would be too depressed due to not having been able to obtain whatever item they had had their eye on. After Ling Han had gotten hold of the blue scale, demonic fruit, and the 9-hoop heaven hero blade, he settled the tab with the origin crystals he had gathered. As for the debt that he owed Long Yong Chang and the others, he'd just have to slowly pay it back. Anyways, he still had a large amount of 100-year ginsengs and Ganoderma. He could just sell these off to Gufeng Hua and the others. They had no shortage of money. Initially, he had been a bit displeased by the way they talked to themselves and decided so arbitrarily that they would pay him a visit on the morrow. However, now that these people had become his clients, his attitude naturally took a change as well. He was glad to play around with them as long as he could settle his debt first. According to Long Yong Chang, his proof of identity as an Earth-grade alchemist would also be coming within these few days, and it was already quite near to his time of departure. Ling Han tossed the 9-hoop heaven hero blade to Kenyi, and after he returned to the inn, he entered into the Black Tower and began to dig out ginsengs and Ganoderma. Actually, there were still a lot of other spirit herbs, but for non-alchemists, ginseng and Ganoderma were still the best. Simply eating them whole would be the best nutrition. On the second day, Gufeng Hua and the others indeed came over. Grandmaster Ling, I really had never imagined that you would actually be this young. Every person that came would say something along these lines, so much that Ling Han felt as if his ears were going to become callous just from hearing so much of the same thing. Ha ha ha, Ling Han, you are indeed a pervert, and have some of the bearing that I used to have years ago. Gufeng Hua's voice was heard. When he entered, he hugged Ling Han enthusiastically, but then he immediately neared Ling Han's ear and whispered, "However, Fairy Chi is mine, and if you dare to snatch her, be cautious that I will pour itchy powder in your underpants and make you have to scratch your D*** every day." This guy released him, his expression still very cordial and warm. Ling Han threw a disdainful glance at him and said, "You pay more attention to your lover than your friends. This is called look out for yourself, or heaven and earth will combine to destroy you. For the sake of my happiness, I can only sacrifice you," Gufeng Hua declared without any reservations. "Brother Ling." Chi Hua Lan arrived gracefully and raised her clasped hands in Ling Han's direction. "I have not yet repaid you for saving me within the Devil's Sky mystery realm and had not thought that you have already become an Earth-grade alchemist. Hua Lan really does not know whether there will come a day when I can still repay you." "Of course there will." Gufeng Hua interrupted. "He and I are good friends. What is his is mine, and what is mine is still mine. So you can pledge yourself and marry me, which is equivalent to having repaid the favor you owe Ling Han." Chi Hualan acted as if she had not heard anything and smiled beautifully at Ling Han, then said, "Brother Ling, would you be interested to be a guest at the Purple Star sect?" She was a disciple of the Purple Star sect. If she actually managed to pull Ling Han into her sect, the value of this credit would be indescribable. And the sect would spare no expense to help Ling Han ascend to the flower blossom tier. Together with the use of spiritual medicines to help extend his lifespan, it would be no issue for Ling Han to live for another 400 years. That was a whole 400 years. If he continued to concoct Earth-grade alchemical pills, how many more flower blossom tier elites would appear in the Purple Star sect? It could be claimed that a high-grade alchemist could completely change the destiny of a sect. Yo, isn't little sister Chi always known for being incorruptible? Why are you now using a honey trap? Amongst a bout of light laughter, a graceful girl came over, her movements flirtatious. She had a lithe figure which was extremely shapely. Her protruding, full breasts could make anyone's mouth water. How could anyone have such a fantastic figure? Her lips were red like fire, and her hair was like a waterfall over her shoulders. This was an extremely beautiful woman. Moreover, she was filled with a fiery bearing, like a fresh flower that was blooming furiously, tempting others to come forward and attempt to pluck her and not care even if they would be wounded by her thorns as a result. Lin Xiangqin. Qi Hualan said softly. This fiery beauty was Lin Xiangqin. She lowered into a bow in Ling Han's direction, her head lowered slightly, revealing a small section of her jade-like nape. It was fair and delicate like silk and akin to jade, extraordinarily beautiful. She was really a master at using her own advantages. She had obviously not made any particularly explicit movements, yet it was enough to make one fully experience her graceful bearing, and induce an itch as well as irresistible desire in one's heart. Utmost imperial sex Lin Xiangqin hereby pays respects to Grandmaster Ling. She did not immediately stand back up, and seemed to be waiting for Ling Han to come forward and help her up. She believed that there would be no man would be willing to pass up such an opportunity, would they? Around them, Gu Fenghua, Su Wintong, and the others all looked captivated. In terms of looks, it was difficult to decide who was superior between her and Qi Hualan. But if one were to talk about bearing and grace, she was much more superior to Qi Hualan. Of course, there would definitely be many men who preferred the pure type like Qi Hualan. Though Lin Xiangqin was only 20 years old, her fiery grace was already filled with the style of a seductive elder sister. Qi Hualan was straightforward in her speech. She instantly gave a humph and declared, "Vixen." Yet Ling Han did not stretch out his hands to help her up. He had already seen many attempts to tempt him with beauty in his last life. At that time he had reached the peak of both alchemy and martial arts at the same time, and the beauties that were willing to throw themselves into his arms had even higher status. There was no lack of even fairies that were in the deity transformation tier. Lin Xiangqin invited a snub, and could not help but be surprised. However, Ling Han had already turned around and walked off, so she could only stand back up on her own. She rubbed her nose, and a defiant expression appeared on her face. Lu Yutong and Li Xichan exchanged a smile. Their Ling Han was not a shallow person. To get his attention, the mere temptation of beauty would not work. Only sincerity would be able to earn his trust. Grandmaster Ling, would you like to come and look around Utmost Imperial Sect with me? Lin Xiangqin immediately caught up to him and asked delicately, not wanting to admit defeat. All right, as long as you agree to one condition of mine, Ling Han said calmly. Hearing such words, everyone could not help but look slightly disdainful. He had put up an act for so long, but in the end he was only a lecher. But who asked this perverted lecher to be an earth-grade alchemist, especially one with a boundless future ahead of him? It was indeed possible that he was worthy of such an extreme beauty like Lin Xiangqin. Lin Xiangqin smirked coldly in her heart, and her despise for Ling Han rose. However, the smile on her face was unchanged, and she asked daintily, "May I know what condition that Grandmaster Ling has?" "Help me eradicate the Winter Moon Sect." Chapter 314. Selling Ginseng and Discussing About Heroes. Chapter 314. Selling Ginseng and Discussing About Heroes. Help me eradicate the Winter Moon Sect. When these words were spoken, everyone fell silent in fear. What kind of existence was the Winter Moon Sect? Though there were many parties that could be claimed sects in the North region, there were only 5 great sects that were publicly acknowledged as the strongest and were collectively known as the 5 sects of the North region. The Winter Moon Sect was one of these 5 sections. Though the Utmost Imperial Sect and Heaven Origin Sect were both very awesome in terms of absolute power, none of them could compare to the Winter Moon Sect. Perhaps only if the 3 of them combined their forces would they be able to stand on an equal footing with the Winter Moon Sect. They would at least require 3 times the ability of the Winter Moon Sect to be able to defeat a sect that used a defensive strategy and possessed a mountain protection great array like the latter. In other words, it would require at least 10 such parties like the Utmost Imperial Sect to work together to make this possible. Furthermore, in this process, even if the battle was won, a heavy price would be paid. For the sake of an Earth-grade alchemist, what party would be willing to do such a thing? Ho ho ho, Grandmaster Ling is a real joker. Everyone laughed dryly. All of a sudden, their arrogance was gone and they had become well-behaved, because no matter how wild they were, they would not dare to say such words like eradicate the Winter Moon sect. Whether they were sincere words from the heart or a mere joke. Ling Han was uncaring. The enmity between him and Feng Yan was something that everyone in the Rain country knew about, and a little investigation would make it known. Thus, no matter how ferocious his words, everyone would only think that it was because of Feng Yan, but would not know that this enmity also involved the previous generation. If someone ordinary said such words, even if the Winter Moon sect did not make a move personally, there would still be a large number of other parties planning to kill Ling Han in order to curry favor with the Winter Moon sect. However, this here was an Earth-grade alchemist, and had status akin to someone in the flower blossom tier, so how could any ordinary party dare to make a move? Even for such a powerful party like the Winter Moon sect, they would still have to worry a bit about the alchemist society behind Ling Han. At the very most, they would only beat up Ling Han so that he would not dare to speak so thoughtlessly. Yet they would definitely not dare to kill Ling Han publicly. Of course, it was a different story, whatever they did covertly. One word was enough to subdue these extremely arrogant young geniuses. As Ling Han continued to ask about the present situation in the North region, he had Zhu Wujiu take out another basket of ginseng and Ganoderma. These young people had no shortage of money. It was apparent from the fact that they were able to toss out 100,000 origin crystals so easily during the auction. Indeed, even if these geniuses came from large sects and had seen and eaten 100-year-old ginsengs and Ganoderma before, when they saw such a large bundle of nutritious tonics filling a basket as if they were mere bok choy, they felt the corners of their mouths twitch violently. AI compared to Grandmaster Ling, we are indeed frogs at the bottom of a well. There are so many 100-year-old ginsengs and Ganoderma. Grandmaster Ling must have gotten hold of an ancient herb garden. It couldn't possibly be an ancient herb garden. All the medicinal herbs here are 100 years old. That's true. Most likely there was a party that had sowed a large number of ginseng and Ganoderma 100 years ago, but for an unknown reason it was destroyed. However, their herb garden was not destroyed. Instead, the plants grew well and were discovered by Grandmaster Ling eventually. Everyone was rueful. This really was luck. Moreover, with the status of an Earth-grade alchemist as support, who would be willing to fall out with Ling Han over just a bit of 100-year-old ginseng and Ganoderma? Ling Han could earn as much money as he liked without worrying that he would be targeted. After all, to the large parties, this was definitely only a minor expense. Zhu Wujiu was in charge of collecting money, whereas Ling Han chatted casually with them and scouted out the situation in the North region. After all, what was mentioned in the books was at least from over 10 years, or even tens of years ago. There was no change in the power structure of the North region. The strongest were still 5 parties that were collectively known as One Valley and 4 sects: the Blood Flame Valley, the Winter Moon sect, the Shinra sect, the Beast Emperor sect, and the Half Moon sect. The Blood Flame Valley was the only party that did not name themselves as a sect, but they were recognized as the most powerful existence in the North region. According to rumors, it was possible that a super elite of the deity transformation tier could arise within their ranks, and they would really dominate and sweep away all others in the North region then. Though the world had 4 regions and 1 prefecture, it was not easy to come and go from one to another. Each had a moat that separated them from the other areas, and it was rumored that this was left behind from a great battle in ancient times. The higher one's ability, the more difficult it would be to cross this gulf. It was precisely because of this that though the North region only had spiritual infant tier elites on standby, they still did not have to worry about being invaded by the elites from the other regions. If we're talking about geniuses of the younger generation, we should definitely mention Zuyu Da of the Blood Flame Valley. He's only 23 years old, but has already broken through to the spiritual pedestal tier. Su Wintong said, his expression envious. In the Heaven Origin sect, he was also one of the strongest of the younger generation, yet was only at the 4th layer of the spiritual ocean tier at present. He was still very far from the peak of the spiritual ocean tier, not to mention breaking through to the spiritual pedestal tier. This step was unbearably difficult. The higher one's cultivation level, the more difficult it would be to break through to the next tier. There was previously a genius who broke through to the flower blossom tier at 32 years old and became the youngest flower blossom tier elite in history. Yet, he spent 122 years to break through to the spiritual infant tier from the flower blossom tier. In the end, he died when he was in the spiritual infant tier and didn't even manage to break through to the deity transformation tier, invoking sighs from everyone. He's even more of a pervert than I am, Gu Feng Huang mumbled to himself from one side. Suo Yuda, Ling Han murmured as he took note of this name. A 22-year-old spiritual pedestal tier elite was indeed shocking. As far as he was aware, even the Sword Emperor and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had not been so awesome at the beginning. He surmised that it had to be because the environment had changed, which had made it easier for the people of today to cultivate. There's also a freak in the Beast Emperor sect called Lu Yang, 24 years old, and similarly in the spiritual pedestal tier. Furthermore, the Beast Emperor sect has a culture of rearing demonic beasts as pets. The combined forces of one person and a beast would mean a further upgrade to battle prowess. Lin Xiangqin, too, mentioned another genius. There's no particularly bright new star in the Shinra sect, on the other hand. However, they have a set of triplets. Though they are still in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, when the 3 of them join forces, they are capable of killing off an opponent in the early stage of the spiritual pedestal tier. So they shouldn't be underestimated, either, Chi Hualan said. Among the young geniuses of the Half Moon sect, there is a girl who is rumored to be as beautiful as a flower. Even Zui Yuda fell in love with her at first sight. He had his master make an offer of marriage, yet was coldly refused, Su Wintong said with a laugh. I heard about that too. That girl's name is Zhu Xianer. She is only 22 years old, but has similarly broken through to the spiritual pedestal tier, which is really something admirable. Lin Xiangqi nodded. She felt an endless envy. They were both women, but why did the other exceed her by such a large margin? Not only that, her beauty is also incredibly shocking. I have seen her lift a corner of her veil to take a sip of water. Though only a bit of her chin was revealed, it was enough to make me infatuated and want nothing more but to die for her sake, someone added, an obsessed expression on his face. Those who had never seen Zhu Xianer before were astonished. She was able to make a young genius infatuated to such an extent that Zhu Xianer really possessed a lot of charm, didn't she? Moreover, she had not even shown her face, and only a glimpse of her chin was enough to make someone so captivated. Inconceivable. I heard it as well. According to rumors, a genius from the Middle State came over here for training and accidentally encountered Zhu Xianer. On the spot, he thought she was a celestial maiden, and even went to the Half Moon sect to ask for her hand in marriage, saying that he wanted to take Zhu Xianer back to the Middle State. Just guess which party of the Middle State did that young genius come from? Another said, seeming like a bit of a show-off. Without waiting for the others to guess, he directly revealed the answer to the riddle. The Heaven's Sword Sect. Chapter 315. You have a lot of hope. Chapter 315. You have a lot of hope. Dark Angel _ Heaven's Sword Sect. It was as if these 3 words possessed a magic of their own, filling the young men and women here with a sense of deep respect. They all wore expressions of endless yearning on their faces. Close to 10,000 years ago, a great calamity happened in our world, and it was the seniors and leaders of such ultra-powerful parties like the Heaven's Sword Sect, the Absolute Saber Sect, and the Cloud Phoenix sect that fought a furious battle which finally brought an end to the great calamity and led to the many generations of peace we have now. Furthermore, the Heaven Sword sect has an ultra-elite of the Shattering Void tier among their ranks, so they're practically a living masterpiece of martial arts. If it was me, needless to say, I would immediately eagerly race over. Haha, if you cut off what you have between your legs and do something extreme to your face, you will have a good chance. Get lost. Everyone broke out into raucous laughter, yet they all had an indescribable yearning for the Heaven's Sword sect. This was a real holy land of martial arts, and possessed an immortal inheritance. Perhaps one day there would appear an ultimate existence who could successfully shatter the void and enter into the ranks of gods. So, in the end, did Zhu Xian e'er go to the middle state? Lu Yutong could not help but ask, filled with curiosity. No, the person who had heard the gossip said. It said that Zhu Xianer is extremely filial. Her master went mad a few years ago when cultivating, and she has sworn that she would definitely help her master recover. Whoever manages to do so, she'll give them no matter how many resources for cultivation they desire, or even marry him. However, according to the words of an amazing healer, only a heaven-grade alchemical pill can heal that kind of injury to a person's Tao. As a result, our fairy here ultimately did not choose to go to the middle state, and who knows which bastard she would ultimately end up with. When he spoke the last few words, he was already gritting his teeth, as if he could already see the goddess of his dreams being embraced by some damn man. His heart ached at the thought. Shua! All of a sudden, everyone's eyes fixed upon Ling Han. What are you all looking at me like that for? Ling Han asked very innocently. If anyone in the North region is capable of becoming a heaven-grade alchemist, that would definitely be you. Gu Fenghua laughed loudly. You're such a pervert that it is only a matter of time for you to become a heaven-grade alchemist. At that time, you'd be able to carry the beauty home. Let's have a chat. Can you give me one of Fairy Zhu's underpants? Pung, 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 pung. Without waiting for Ling Han to speak, the pervert had already been surrounded by more than 10 people who admired Zhu Xianer and instantly beaten so much that he didn't even look human anymore. Yes, that's Fairy Zhu we're talking about here, Lu Yutong said with a very jealous air. Li Xichan was the same as well. Only Hu Niu was completely uncaring and thought inside her head, Ling Han is Niu's, a bunch of silly big girls. Ling Han merely smiled calmly. In his last life, what kind of beauty had he not seen? Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was even acclaimed as the most beautiful woman in history, and he was still unmoved. Only, when she asked him to concoct an alchemical pill for her, he had Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden tell him her real name. And he had no idea what was the woman's problem. It was as if asking her for her name was like killing her. And afterwards, she would frequently come visit, and without saying much, she would simply take alchemical pills from him as she liked. It was as if she thought herself his master. If he wanted to stop her and battled her, that was merely asking for torture. The reason why Ling Han had so wanted to break through to the Shattering Void tier was because he had had enough of being bullied by Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and wanted to turn the tables and become the boss. And the result was great. Not too long after, he was killed by the Black Tower. If Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had entered the realm of gods, she would probably be beautiful enough to make one flustered, wouldn't she? All of a sudden, he was a bit nostalgic about Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, as well as Sword Emperor and also Setting Sun Saber Emperor. Had these guys actually died long ago, or had they broken through to the realm of gods? Theoretically, since even Jiang Fei Yu had possibly entered the ranks of gods, there should be even less of a problem for these guys. Thinking so much that you're entranced. Lu Yutong was jealous and could not help but pinch Ling Han's waist. Yet when she saw that Li Xichan had pinched the other side of Ling Han's face in a very well-coordinated movement, She could not help but let out a laugh. Yet Ling Han asked, "Then what about the Winter Moon sect? Do they have any particularly shocking geniuses?" "In the case of the Winter Moon sect, the 7 sons of the Ao clan should be the strongest," Lin Xiangqin said after some consideration. "Ao Feng's 7th son?" Ling Han asked. "No, Ao Feng has 7 sons that are all geniuses, and are collectively known as the 7 sons of the Ao clan," Su Wintong explained. "These 7 people are all at the peak of the spiritual ocean tier, and every single one of them could very possibly break through to the spiritual pedestal tier at any time. A dragon had 9 sons, and indeed each one was different. Ao Yangming was only in the element gathering tier, but his brothers were already about to break through to the spiritual pedestal tier. Perhaps there were some that were even more pitiful and still stuck in the body refining tier." Ling Han rubbed his chin and asked, "Who are these 7 people?" Gu Feng Hua shook his head and said, "Ao Feng has too many illegitimate children. Who could remember all of them? Those 7 are the most outstanding of the bunch, and are thus separately named as Ao Eldest, Ao Second, Ao Third, all the way to Ao Seventh." This, Ling Han felt a cold sweat gather on his body. He had too many children. Outsiders couldn't even clearly remember their names anymore. If he crippled these 7 people, Ao Feng would probably be heartbroken, wouldn't he? When he remembered the pain that Ling Dongxing had suffered, Ling Han could not help but gnash his teeth with hatred. Ao Feng definitely had to be left as the last one to be killed, so as to allow him to have a taste of the kind of agony that bored into one's heart before he died. His idea was very successful, and he managed to sell off a large amount of 100-year-old ginsengs and Ganoderma, which helped him earn a crazy sum of close to 400,000 origin crystals. One had to understand, even with so many people from the 9 nations of the desolate north, they had only managed to spend just over 100,000 origin crystals, but there were only more than 10 people here, yet they had managed to buy close to 400,000 origin crystals worth of ginsengs and Ganoderma, which proved how wealthy these people from the north region were. If one was to compare himself to another, he'd just die from ire. Everyone chatted with one another, updating each other on their present situation, and soon left afterwards. Ling Han too made a trip to the Star Brilliance Palace Hall, and paid off the origin crystals that he had borrowed from Long Yongchang and the others. He had initially thought that if there was not enough, he'd use the 7 turns break crisis pill to cover the remaining amount, but did not think that the people of the North region would be so impressive. After Cheng Fei Jun had disappeared for 2 days, it had finally attracted the attention of the Star Brilliance Palace Hall, and they sent out people to search for this young Grandmaster Alchemist. But how could they possibly find him? In the beginning, there were some who suspected that his disappearance was connected to Ling Han, but it was soon clearly found out that Cheng Fei Jun had been called out by Luo Jifeng's scholar boy. Yet now not only Cheng Fei Jun had disappeared, even Luo Jifeng and his scholar boy had vanished as well. Thus, it was naturally not related to Ling Han. Ling Han decided to add fuel to the fire and reveal the fact that Luo Jifeng was a disciple of the Thousand Corpse sect, which would make the world vigilant against this evil sect. The Thousand Corpse sect could even do something like destroying the desolate north, so it was not impossible that they would think of destroying the whole northern region or even the whole world. He had Guang Yuan, Zhu Wujiu, and the others spread out the rumors. As long as they carelessly mentioned a word about it at places like tea houses and inns, this kind of rumor would definitely quickly spread throughout the world as if it had grown wings. Indeed, it was only a few days, and the gossip about the Thousand Corpse sect had spread throughout the small town about how terrifying this party was, and about how they planned to turn the whole world into a corpse land. In the process of spreading gossip, the rumor would only be added upon, and thus the Thousand Corpse sect was described as more and more evil as the gossip continued to spread. They were practically by all. However, Ling Han thought that this was a very good thing. There was indeed a need to increase the sense of vigilance against the Thousand Corpse sect. This party was really too evil. Chapter 316 Reappearance of the Cloaked Woman. Chapter 316 Reappearance of the Cloaked Woman. Dark Angel _ After another few days, Ling Han had finally obtained his proof of identity as an Earth-grade alchemist. In this way, no matter which angle you looked at it from, he was still an authentic, 100% genuine Earth-grade alchemist. We should set out. Ling Han snapped his fingers and led the others out of the Fallen Moon Gorge, heading towards the Winter Moon sect. The wide horizons of the North region soon stretched out beautifully in front of them. As there was a high mountain that separated the two areas, the truth was that there was a very clear difference in climate of both areas. The desolate north was very dry and cold, but the north region was very humid and warm. There were large stretches of tall trees growing here that had large, fat leaves. It was nothing like the desolate north, where the majority of greenery was the type with needle-shaped leaves that could withstand extreme cold. However, the spiritual qi here was obviously much denser. The last time I came here, it was 17 years ago. Guang Yuan could not help but say wistfully. In the depths of his eyes, there was a barely noticeable pain and fury. Big Brother Guang, the conditions for cultivation here are obviously better than in the rain country. Why had you returned? Lu Yutong asked curiously. Because of Ling Han, she couldn't possibly address Guang Yuan as senior. Guang Yuan sighed and said, "It is too difficult to establish yourself in the North region." He shook his head. It's true that the spiritual qi here is indeed much denser, but without a supply of alchemical pills, what would be the point of merely having dense spiritual qi? There are too many martial artists in the North region. Even spiritual ocean tier elites can't earn much money unless they're willing to obediently refine origin crystals. But if one were to refine origin crystals, how much time would be left for cultivation? There are too many powerful people here. If one wants a better life, he'd at least have to be in the spiritual pedestal tier. Lu Yutong and the others instantly fell silent. That was the spiritual pedestal tier they were talking about. In the Rain Country, that would be the most powerful parties like the 8 great clans, who would leave behind such a comfortable lifestyle and run off to the North region to start fighting for their own place again. Furthermore, in the Rain Country, the spiritual pedestal tier was considered the farthest one could go on the path of martial arts, and one could not possibly advance a step further. Then, what was the point of coming out to the North region? To get a flower blossom tier cultivation technique? That was harder than climbing to the heavens. This kind of cultivation technique would be heavily protected and hidden very well by every party, and they would not easily allow an outstanding immortal power to emerge from any other party. Among the various sects of the North region, the Winter Moon sect was the one closest to the 9 nations of the desolate North. However, though that was the case, once one left the Fallen Moon Gorge, one would still have to journey for about half a month's time to reach the Yulong Mountains, where the Winter Moon sect was located. The Yulong Mountains were a very large mountain range. From north to south, they stretched out for over 10,000 miles, whereas from east to west, they extended for over 2,000 miles. In the North region, they were considered one of the largest mountain ranges. The mountains were a source of various spiritual herbs and also contained a large number of valuable demonic beasts that had great value as medicinal ingredients. And such a large, valuable mountain range was the private property of the Winter Moon sect. If any martial artist, not of their sect, dared to enter the mountains and poach or steal the beasts and spiritual herbs within, the only fate would be death once caught. There was no exception. However, the Winter Moon sect had set up protective arrays to defend this large mountain range, so weaker martial artists would have no way to sneak in anyways. Ling Han concocted a large number of change appearance pills on the way. They were not meant to be swallowed, but rather rubbed on the face. They made it possible to change one's face as one desired, and when the effects of the medicine solidified, one would be able to become a completely different person. However, the change appearance pill could only last for 10 days. Furthermore, one could not wash his face in these 10 days. The effects of the pill would be gone when one comes into contact with water, and very soon, one's real appearance would be revealed. Ling Han planned to enter the Winter Moon sect. Whilst dealing heavy damage, he would steal some spiritual herbs and also probe for news about his mother. In the best-case scenario, he would be able to find the 2 remaining spiritual herbs he needed in the Winter Moon sect and concoct the Restore Spirit pill. Then he would immediately return to Grey Cloud Town and heal his father's spirit base. After that, he would have Ling Dongxing take alchemical pills like crazy and push up his cultivation level rapidly. Kan Ye's features were very distinct. Guang Yuan was past the acceptable age, and Lu Yutong and Li Xichan would definitely not want to pass 10 days without washing their faces. As for Zhu Wujiu, his talent seemed to be a bit poor, so the Winter Moon sect might not take him. Thus, Ling Han decided to leave all of them outside who would be moving alone. Hunyo was too little. No sect would take such a little girl. Who'd be willing to take care of a little girl? And if Hunyo's cultivation was exposed, that would only create a huge commotion, and by that time, Feng Yan would definitely recognize him. Moreover, since Hunyo was here, how could Ling Han be far away? As a result, the little girl stayed with the rest as well. The carriage rocked and swayed all the way, and just when they were about to reach the Winter Moon sect, they heard sounds of battle coming from a nearby location. Soon after, they saw a woman that was completely hidden under a cloak appear staggeringly in front of their carriage. When she saw the slowly moving carriage, a sliver of delight appeared on her face. She took a great leap and entered the carriage from the back. At this time, Ling Han was currently using the change appearance pill to change his appearance and was dressing himself in front of the mirror. Lu Yutong and the other 2 girls were naturally in the Black Tower, and when he suddenly saw a stranger appear in front of him, he could not help but be surprised. He was shocked, and the woman was even more shocked. A great Earth-grade alchemist was actually acting coyly in front of the mirror like this. What kind of pervert was this? You seem to have misunderstood, Ling Han said weakly. Quiet, she said fiercely. She stretched out a hand and grabbed onto Ling Han's neck and said, Cover for me or I will strangle you to death. Ling Han was unafraid. The moment she made a move, he would be able to instantly enter the Black Tower. For someone who had the divine sense of the heaven tier like him, how could his reflexes be slower than one's in the spiritual pedestal tier? He was only curious. Though there were indeed many women who wore cloaks, together with her voice, he was certain that he had not made a mistake. This was precisely that woman who had participated in the auction at the Fallen Moon Gorge a few days ago. Why was she here? And who had she been fighting with moments ago? Hush! The carriage suddenly stopped. Did you see a cloaked woman pass by? An elderly voice was heard. It was that elder in the flower blossom tier who had competed against the cloaked woman in the bidding at the auction at the Fallen Moon Gorge. The cloaked woman's body gave an obvious tremble, yet she suppressed it by force. The divine sense of the flower blossom tier was too powerful. He would be able to sense if there was the slightest bit of oddness. Ling Han smiled calmly and activated his divine sense to surround the cloaked woman. This was divine sense of the heaven tier. The cloaked woman did not notice it at all, and the same was true for that elder in the flower blossom tier. No. The coachman immediately shook his head. The elder in the flower blossom tier used divine sense to sweep a few times over the 2 carriages, but did not discover the aura he was familiar with. With a stomp of his foot, he had left with the winds, scaring the coachman so much that he knelt down and kowtowed. Ling Han withdrew his divine sense and asked, Why was he chasing after you? Why do you care about it so much? The cloaked woman asked coldly. Is this really a good way to talk with your savior? Ling Han laughed. I will repay this favor you've done me." The cloaked woman was still very cold. Ling Han shrugged and said, "I don't even know what you look like or what your name is. Where do you want me to go to find you, to repay me?" The cloaked woman was very impatient and said, "When my injuries are healed, I will go and find you. How do I know whether you're simply speaking mere words or not?" Ling Han was unwilling to listen to any excuses. He was interested in both this cloaked woman and that elder in the flower blossom tier. Why had they spent so much money just to buy an alchemy furnace that he had used before? However, at this point in time, while he could not defeat that elder in the flower blossom tier, the cloaked woman was currently heavily injured. This was a rare opportunity. Chapter 317. Chapter 317. Cold Spear Association. Dark Angel _ The cloaked woman gritted her teeth in anger and could not help but say, "I am Mu Fei Yao. You can find me in the Middle State." Ling Han could not help but grin. This woman is so susceptible to provocation. She should not be too old. He continued, "You conceal yourself like this, and you still want me to believe you." Mu Fei Yao stretched out a hand, about to remove her cloak, but then she immediately humphed and said, "I almost fell for your words, you cunning brat." Her eyes turned cold, and she continued, "If you continue to provoke me, beware that I will snap your neck." "That would depend on whether you have that ability or not." Ling Han suddenly exploded, turned the tables, and grabbed onto Mu Fei Yao's neck, holding her against the wall of the carriage. Mu Fei Yao was flabbergasted. She was in the spiritual pedestal tier, and even though she had suffered heavy injuries, resulting in her battle prowess dropping to the level of the spiritual ocean tier, she was still stronger by an unknown number of times than someone in the first layer of the gushing spring tier. Yet now, she was actually subdued by Ling Han in a single move. How could she believe that such a thing was possible? Ling Han was astonishingly powerful, enough to compare to the 5th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. "Which party are you from? Why did you insist on buying that alchemy furnace?" Ling Han asked, spending so many origin crystals just to buy a damaged, useless alchemy furnace. He did not believe that it was because she had money to burn, what more when there were 2 people fighting over it. "Why do I have to tell a liar like you?" Mu Fei Yao asked defiantly. "Because if you don't tell me, I'm going to smack your behind," Ling Han said calmly. Mu Fei Yao suddenly trembled in fear. She was a pure, untouched girl. If she actually had her behind smacked by a damn man, then what face would she have to continue living? Especially when this man had the same name as the alchemy emperor from 10,000 years ago. This was one of their great taboos. However, she was even more unyielding. Her pride did not allow her to surrender. She gritted her teeth and said, "If you dare to commit an outrage, I will spare no expense and kill you at all costs." Huh. Ling Han was uncaring of her threat. "I've changed my mind now. I'm going to take you to someplace crowded and smack your behind in front of everyone." Mu Fei Yao inhaled sharply and said in a trembling voice, "You can't, you can't." "You can test my limits," Ling Han said calmly. Mu Fei Yao looked into Ling Han's eyes and saw that though his eyes were clear, they were filled with a wild nature. Such a man did not do things with any misgivings or qualms in mind, would definitely follow up on his words and do as he had said. It was definitely not wise to anger such a man. "I am a disciple of the Cold One Spear Association." She conceded slightly. Anyway, this was no secret. Ling Han was instantly startled. The Cold Spear Association. The Cold Spear Association was a little secret that belonged to him and his 4 disciples. They had once thought of forming a party and had even come up with the name the Cold Spear Association. Yet before they had even started officially forming it, Ling Han had already disappeared within the ancient historical site. Could this Cold Spear Association have been formed by his 4 disciples after his death? If that was the case, then it was very reasonable that Mu Fei Yao would bid for an alchemy furnace that he had once used before. But why had that elder of the flower blossom tier also competed for this alchemy furnace? Moreover, these two people had even come to blows. What was the reason for that? More likely than not, it had to be because of the alchemy furnace. Then that old man from before? Ling Han asked. He is from the fake Cold Spear Association. Mu Fei Yao's face was instantly filled with rage. These con men, we must eliminate all of them and not allow them to travel the world under Grandmaster Ling's name. Ling Han was even more astonished. There were actually two Cold Spear Associations. Mu Fei Yao thought that he was a fake, and probably he also thought the same about her. As a result, both sides fought vehemently over the alchemy furnace that he had once used. But the problem was that he had already died for 10,000 years, so why were they still so reverent towards him and pay such a heavy price just for an alchemy furnace that he had once used? Could it be that both Cold Spear Associations had been formed by his disciples? Had some kind of conflict arisen amongst them which caused resentment towards each other to rise, so much that they were willing to destroy the other? Just from the fact that they were willing to spare no expense to buy the alchemy furnace he had once used, he knew that these two Cold Spear Associations were very reverent towards him. But if that was the case, why would they hate each other so much? Ling Han felt a headache coming on. What had happened after his death that caused a conflict to rise up among his disciples and resulted in them forming two separate cold water associations that were determined to obliterate the other? However, these two sides were so fiercely opposing one another just because they thought the other side were a fake Cold Spear Association, wanting nothing more but to destroy the other side. Then, if he confessed to his identity of his last life, he would definitely be thought of as a super con man by both Cold Spear Associations, and they would probably try to crush him into dust. Just looking at Mu Fei Yao, she was definitely mad and could do anything incomprehensible. What qualms would she still have about his status as an Earth-grade alchemist? You can leave. Ling Han tossed Mu Fei Yao out of the carriage without the slightest intention to treat her tenderly just because she was a woman. Mu Fei Yao tumbled heavily onto the ground, her face filled with disbelief. She was actually tossed out by Ling Han just like that? This despicable guy. Don't let her encounter him again, or she would definitely make him suffer. With even more questions in his head, Ling Han finally arrived at the Winter Moon sect. At this time, there were still 2 days left before the Winter Moon sect would open their doors to recruit disciples. For a large sect like the Winter Moon sect, their main doors were naturally closed at normal times. One usually left or entered the sect through the side doors. Only when there was a big event, such as paying respects to their ancestors, or if there was an extremely important, esteemed guest visiting, or the disciple recruitment that took place every 5 years, would the main doors be opened. From far away, a pair of humongous stone doors had sealed off the pathway into the mountains, and there were 2 smaller side doors at either side of it. One was for entry, while the other was for exit. There were restless streams of people around, which showed off the prosperity of the Winter Moon sect. Further up, there were clouds and mist curling around the mountains as if they were dragons. Thought there was a large city near the Winter Moon sect called Sea Breeze City. It was still some distance away after all. Moreover, the time for the main doors to be opened for disciple recruitment had already neared. So there were many who chose to set up tents at the foot of the mountains to wait for this day to come. After all, this was a rare opportunity that would only come every 5 years. The people here were not just the young people from the desolate north, but also those that came from the whole north region. The Winter Moon sect was one of the 5 greatest sects of the north region. So if one was able to enter into the sect, that was equivalent to having opened up the door to an incredibly bright future. As a result, it had naturally attracted uncountable numbers of young people with dreams. Looking down from a higher position, that was definitely a wide stretch of black. Everywhere he looked, there were people. Just here, there were at least a few 100,000 people. At first, this number might seem like a lot, but one only had to think about the total number of residents of the North region to know that these few 100,000 was really quite normal. Merely the 9 nations of the desolate North had about 1 billion residents, and the desolate North was only considered a tiny, backward corner of the North region. Ling Han had the others stay behind in the Sea Breeze City, whereas he alone came to the foot of the mountains of the Winter Moon sect. There were already a lot of rumors about the test that would take place the day after tomorrow. The first was about the prize. Those that managed to get into the top 10 would be richly rewarded, and the prize for the champion was a spirit tool called Thunder Battle Armor. This spirit tool was rumored to have been passed down from ancient times, and in the long passage of history, it had suffered much damage. As a result, its might was no longer as great as it had been eons ago, but it was still an extremely valuable treasure. It's actually the Thunder Battle Armor. Ling Han was extremely astonished. Chapter 318, Thunder Battle Armor. Chapter 318, Thunder Battle Armor. It was nothing too surprising that the Winter Moon sect was willing to use such a spirit tool as a prize, because the champion of the trials would definitely be heavily developed by the Winter Moon sect and would later become one of the core members of the sect. Thus, this spirit tool only made a huge circle and ultimately would return to the hands of the Winter Moon sect. It's actually the Thunder Battle Armor. Ling Han was extremely surprised. This was not the first time he had heard of the Thunder Battle Armor. Long ago in his last life, the Thunder Battle Armor had appeared before, and its owner at that time was the famous Thunder Empress Zi Shuexian, one of the 7 ultimate elites of the Heaven Tier in his last life. Though Zi Shuexian was only ranked 4th amongst the 7 kings of his last life, the 3 people ranked in front of her were super monsters like Sword Emperor, Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and Setting Sun Saber Emperor. Being ranked 4th did not mean that she was weak. On the other hand, aside from Ling Han, the other 6 people were all overwhelmingly powerful. And the reason why Zi Shuexian was so powerful was related to the fact that she was wearing the Thunder Battle Armor. This battle armor not only had shockingly high defense, but could also release the power of thunder, which allowed her to be ranked 4th. He had never thought that at the end of 10,000 years, the Thunder Battle Armor would appear once again, and had actually fallen in the hands of such a small party like the Winter Moon sect. Could it be that Zi Shuexian had fallen? That couldn't be right either. Even if Zi Shuexian did not manage to shatter the void and become a god, she still had a Blue Thunder sect behind her. That sect was a great sect and was still sturdy even today, as immortal as the Heaven's Sword sect and the Absolute Saber sect. How could they have allowed such a priceless treasure to be abandoned outside? No, if this Thunder Battle Armor still had the might that it had previously, then would the Winter Moon sect actually still use it as a prize? Even the most powerful of the Winter Moon sect would covet such a treasure. Perhaps it was too heavily damaged, and so the Blue Thunder sect had given up on it, and none of the powerful elites of Winter Moon sect had any interest in it, simply deciding to use it as a prize. After all, it would still stay in the Winter Moon sect in the end. Never mind, I'll get hold of it first, Ling Han mumbled to himself. He was really interested this time, because even if the Thunder Battle Armor was damaged, this was still a level 9 spirit tool, and was definitely worth him making a move on it. This time the Winter Moon sect would be recruiting a total of 10,000 disciples, and to squeeze into these 10,000 disciples was not an easy task, as the number of young geniuses of the northern region was uncountable. Furthermore, it was even more difficult to become the champion of these 10,000 winners. Moreover, what was worse was the fact that even those disciples of the Winter Moon sect that were under 30 years old could participate in this trial. These people were naturally participating for the prizes. Aside from the prize for the champion, the Thunder Battle Armor, there were still other spirit tools, a few spiritual talismans, and some alchemical pills. Even for the disciples of the Winter Moon sect, they were very attractive prizes. Thankfully, everyone abided by the condition that only those below 30 years old could participate. The content of the trial was extremely simple. Everyone would enter the Yulong Mountains and given a very small plaque. In the subsequent 3 days, what everyone had to do was to snatch each other's plaques. After 3 days, the number of plaques in everyone's possession would be counted, and those who managed to rank among the top 10,000 would be able to enter the Winter Moon sect. And those who ranked among the top 100 would get the opportunity to enter into the second round of the trial, and the top 10 would emerge from this second round. These 10 people would then be able to get an additional prize, and the prize for the champion was the Thunder Battle Armor. Thus, this was a matter of strategy. Just from this place alone, there were a few 100,000 people, and there was still a considerable number in Sea Breeze City. There would be no problem for the total number of participants to break through 1 million. This meant that there would definitely be large numbers of people who would be disqualified, but precisely due to this reason, some who were weaker in ability had another kind of value if they sold off their plaques. It was definitely better than working hard for nothing. More importantly, participating in this trial was an extremely dangerous thing. The Winter Moon sect had not said that one was not allowed to wound or even kill another in this trial. Once this information was known, many decided to give up. Since that was the case, why should they not take advantage of the opportunity to earn a small profit? Participate in the trial, get a plaque, and after the trial began, immediately hand over their plaque to the buyer, then leave. Thus, those buyers with ability had already begun to take action, and privately got in contact with others to discuss the selling price. Hi, this rather tan brother. Ling Han naturally was bothered by quite a considerable number of people. He had already sent off a lot of potential buyers, and this time there came a rather plump young man who was wearing gold, silver, and jewels all over, as if he was afraid that others did not know that he was wealthy. Ling Han's eyes swept over him. This young man was really quite wealthy. Those gold, silver, and jeweled ornaments were naturally trash in the eyes of a martial artist. But the hairpin he was wearing was made from black lacquer wood, his belt was woven from spotted flower silk and black sorgold silk, and the sword sheath attached at his waist was forged from 8 treasure star iron. These ingredients were all shockingly valuable, and required a great amount of origin crystals to obtain. He believed that even for the true disciples of the Winter Moon sect, it would be a very surprising thing to get even one of these items, what more when so many different treasures belonged to one single person. Ling Han had already changed his appearance to become a rather tanned young man. His face had changed considerably as well and become rather ordinary, so he now belonged to the type that would definitely not be noticed in a crowd. This brother with a plump purse, what is it? Ling Han asked with a grin. The plump young man bared his teeth with a smile which was full of sincerity. He stretched out a hand to pat Ling Han's shoulder and said, "Brother, the trial will begin tomorrow, so do you want to get into the top 10,000 or even the top 100? What is the use of mere wanting?" Ling Han sighed deliberately. He was a little surprised, since this guy was actually not here to buy off his plaque. Hee, I have a way, as long as you can afford the price. The plump young man came closer and said in a low voice, I have a spirit tool that can be used by a gushing spring tier martial artist, and the might of this spirit tool is comparable to the level of the spiritual ocean tier. With this spirit tool in your possession, you need only wait for 3 days, then you'd be able to destroy all in our way, so there would naturally be multiple plaques just waiting for you to pick up. Oh, let me see. Ling Han said, smiling. Come. Come with me someplace with less people. You can't allow such a treasure to be seen by others, the plump young man said, pretending to be very mysterious. The two of them came to a remote corner. The plump young man drew out a crimson ball and said, This is called the startling Heaven Thunderbolt Vanishing World. Exploding the world, extinguishing, extensively exploding light sphere. Just look. He shook the ball a few times and tossed it on the ground. Pung! Instantly a large explosion was caused, and the explosive force was shockingly tremendous. When the dust had settled, the plump young man picked up the ball he had previously thrown onto the ground and said proudly to Ling Han, "How is it? However, this thing can only be used 10 times, so when you take it back, don't use it too carelessly." Ling Han grinned. The plump young man wore a ring, and this was not an ordinary ring, but a spatial spirit tool. When he picked up that ball, he had already stored the ball back into the spatial ring, then drew out another ball from within. It looked the same, but it was a fake. This was a con man.